make every day. No two are the same. I wanna be like most girls. I wanna be like most girls. I wanna be like I wanna be like most girls. Most girls. Wanna be most girls. I fight to make every day. No two are the same. I wanna be like most girls. I wanna be like most girls. I wanna be like I wanna be like
America, the possibilities are endless. You can fight for and defend our constitutional rights. Raise the next generation of patriots. Use your skills to save lives. Protect those closest to you. Create an award-winning cinnamon roll recipe. You can be a cute conservative.
Good morning, everybody. Wow, it's packed. It's terrific to have all of you here. There's a lot we want to talk about this morning, and thank you for getting up so early. And who traveled the farthest to be here? Anyone from Alaska? Oh, Alaska, there you go. That's probably, anyone overseas that traveled to be here? Anyone? No? One person? What country? Guatemala. Okay, Guatemala's the winner. There you go. We've been doing this for a couple years, and to see it grow throughout the years has been amazing. It's been quite an amazing month. About 5 weeks ago, I got married to my wife, and you'll hear from her tomorrow. And what I should have said yesterday when Alex Clark said conservative women are better looking, I should have said, yes, I should know, I just married one. And there's a couple things I want to talk about. We'll talk about politics, we'll talk about government and all that stuff, but there's a lot happening right now in the country, and as soon as young women and women in general start to talk about this correctly, things will change. I was just at a school board meeting in Chandler Unified School District in Arizona, and there were some dads that were there, but it was the moms that showed up at this Chandler Unified School District meeting and started just screaming at these school board members. All of a sudden, everything changes. Because, look, if we're honest with ourselves, as soon as the women of a nation rise up and they start to say there's something wrong with this, and they start to, that kind of maternal instinct of the nation kicks in, then all of a sudden we can start to save the country. And so we need to talk about what is it that conservatives actually stand for. Because I think there's been some confusion about that, especially over the last couple of years. And this is where we at Turning Point USA want to be we want to be on the leading edge of this, especially with young women and young conservative women. So we first started this conference back in 2015 when Barack Obama was still president, and a lot of the chatter and the talk was about kind of anti-socialism, and obviously we don't like socialism. Socialism's terrible, it's awful, it's immoral, it's killed over 100 million people over the last 100 years, and I think that we've done a pretty good job of expressing that. But if we also don't talk about kind of what is freedom, what is liberty, what are we doing here, then we're just going to be the anti-socialist movement, which is fine in some settings, But that's not actually a way to build a durable political movement or a cultural movement of actually what we stand for and why we stand for those things. And so there's three things in particular I want to go through with you of what I want you to remember and kind of why we're here. And all of it is incredibly politically incorrect. Like all these three things you're not allowed to say on a college campus, you're not allowed to believe, which is exactly why I'm going to lead with them at 9 o'clock in the morning here at the Young Women's Leadership Summit. So the first thing is we have to be very clear, women are women and men are men. So that's, and men are not women and women are not men. So men are better at some things than women and women are better at some things than men. And this idea that like, oh, I could do everything a man does, or a man says I could do everything a woman does, that's a lie. Now, that's not to say that certain women might be at the highest levels of excellence, be able to be very competitive. But generally, the general rule is the way that God designed us, through whatever reason of brilliance that we should not even question. Women have certain character traits, such as the ability to have empathy, to nurture, to raise children, to be able to listen attentively, to have a higher level of focus, things that I struggle with. Men are more likely to have a singular task, be able to, quite honestly, run through a wall to get it done, be able to also have higher levels of testosterone, which is nice when you want to have an entire functioning economy built on hopefully using your hands, and have plumbers, electricians, and HVAC, and police officers, and firefighters. Not to say that women can't do those things, but when left to the agency of choice, women are more likely to go into elementary school education. They're more likely to become a psychologist. They're more likely to be in something that requires empathy and listening and counseling. And men are more likely to be into something like engineering or business or finance, like getting the deal done. Now, if your nature tells you today that you want to have children and raise a family and go work for some boring, woke, anti-American company kind of doesn't really interest you, having children and having a family and getting married will have a much larger and more positive impact on you and our nation than go becoming a partner at some law firm. That's actually not actually very fulfilling. In fact, don't pursue that if you think that's going to give you happiness. You will be a miserable, unmarried 33-year-old woman. Let me say that again. You will be a miserable, unmarried 33-year-old woman if you go pursue corporate, like, I'm going to go climb the corporate ladder. Okay, fine. What really matters is, am I able to replicate my values? Can I find someone that I can spend the rest of my life with? Am I going to actually have that kind of sacrificial love that's talked about in the Bible? That kind of love where I can pour into somebody? That's eternal and divine and beautiful. Not saying, you know what? I'm 35 and unmarried, but I'm a partner at Goldman Sachs, but I'm going to go revolutionize the world. You want to know why there's so many angry liberal women that live in New York and Los Angeles? It's because they've worshiped the corporate ladder for the last 10 years and they have not actually valued what matters. And so, obviously, you're not allowed to say all this. And by the way, if you want to go become like a Dagny Taggart, the character in Atlas Shrugged, then so be it. You have the liberty and the freedom to do that. I just want to make sure you manage your expectations, that if you think that's going to give you some form, like eventually you're going to be at that place of happiness, I just want to caution you. The happiest, the wealthiest people in the world that I meet are not the billionaires that I've had a chance to spend time with. They're the people with 9, 10, and 11 children. They are the wealthiest people in the world. They're the people that homeschool their own kids. They are the people that go to church at 7 a.m. on Sunday morning. They're the people that are doing everything they possibly can to pour into what actually matters, that's going to live longer than themselves. So that's the first thing, which is we as conservatives, and especially conservative women, we have to embrace what matters and what lasts and value what is eternal, not what is momentary, not what feels good and not what is good. Now, you as women have a lot more power than you might think here. Now, let me just take a poll. How many of you are generally dissatisfied with the pool of men that you have to date or you have to go towards? Raise your hand. Right. So, now, let me turn this on you, though. That is 50% on you. Yeah, it is. It's 50% on you. It's 50% on the men who are generally weak, metrosexual, like vegan milk drinking, like soy milk, liberal, all that. And by the way, I am very, very direct towards them about getting your life in order and assuming responsibility. Stop blaming other people for your problems and be someone worthy that someone actually wants to spend their life with. But at the same time, are you portraying to the world on social media someone that has something worth desiring? Or are you just putting it all out there and saying, I think pleasure is my ultimate value? Is that what you're putting on social media? Maybe, I don't know. You can make that own decision. However, you have to understand that the way that men view a lot of your social media accounts is a lot different than how women view your social media accounts. I want to say that again. The way that men view your social media accounts are a lot different than the way that women view your social media accounts. I know this is completely opposite than a lot of the kind of predominant culture of, you know what, the most important thing, I'm going to go out till 2 a.m. and have a wonderful time, and okay, whatever, fine, you could do that if you want. If you think that's going to give you long-lasting and eternal, a place of where, not just happiness, but a place where you're content, then I got a newsflash for you, that's not going to happen. So what do you have to actually seek? Well, you have to embrace things that last, like having a family and having children. And so we have the most unmarried generation in American history. Let me say that again. The most unmarried generation in American history. Why? It's because at most kind of like women empowerment summits, people come up and they say, you know what, you live in a patriarchy, all men are garbage and terrible and awful, and don't get married and have kids. Instead, go become a corporate partner at some law firm. What kind of message does that send to men? Well, if men are told by the time that they're 8 years old that they're terrible and they're abusive and they're awful and you never have to take responsibility, you never have to be a guardian, then they're going to say, you know what, I'm going to go kind of be the lost boys at Peter Pan. I'm not going to ever take responsibility for my life. And so there's actually something beautiful that we should embrace as this tradition of the Western family. It's a good thing. In fact, we should rebuild the American family, and we need to rebuild it quickly. So we have about 2,500 young women here. We have 2,500 young women here. If every single one of you got married and had at least 5 kids, we could take over the entire state of Wyoming in like 30 years. And it all kind of ties together. I laugh about this. I ask kind of young women that get married, they're like, do you want to have kids? They're like, yeah, I want to have one of each. Like, what are you, like picking out like tile? Like, what? It's like I want to have one of each. Like, okay, fine. And look, everyone's free to make their own choices, obviously. I'm not here to judge. I'm making a general social critique that what's happening right now is deeply unhealthy. It's creating people that are constantly looking through their devices and their phones and their dopamine machines, and we'll get into that, for their value and their net worth. So I deleted all my social media apps about 6 months ago, and this is harder for women than for men, by the way. It is, because all the numbers show that Instagram is just a female-dominant app, more than even YouTube is more male-dominated. And did it 6 months ago. Our team still obviously posts on social media, but I really believe that a lot of stuff that happens on social media is absolute and complete garbage, almost all of it. And from the TikTok generation to Snapchat to Instagram, and I ask myself, I say, is it actually making us more decent human beings? And I think it's actually the opposite. I actually think it's making us terrible to each other. I think that it's making people value things that do not matter. And so this kind of ties into kind of some of the BLM Incorporated protests last year. I'm convinced, and a lot of you have friends like this, if social media did not exist, no one would have showed up to these protests last year. Like, oh, let me show a picture of you. Like, okay, got it. I'm going to be the one that ends racism in America as I, show you how good of a person I am with my picture. Like, okay, got it. Or the black tile thing, which drove me absolutely insane. And the black tile thing in particular, which was nothing more than, I'm going to show you that I'm a better person than you are. It's virtue signaling, which is all signaling and no virtue. And really, in reality, it should be, okay, are you actually trying to improve your own character and actually try to become a better person in this world? Which, that's part of the struggle that's happening right now, and you're seeing this happen, where so many young people are saying, I don't need to improve myself. I need to go revolutionize the world around me. So the way it used to work in the 1970s was that we used to teach children, like, you got a lot of work to do. In fact, you're pretty awful. And America's awesome. Now we say that to our kids, you're awesome and America's awful. The opposite. And what that does, and that, by the way, this feeds into what I think is one of the most destructive movements ever, which is the self-esteem movement. I can't stand the self-esteem movement. It's awful. And where you would tell young people in 8th grade, you're perfect the way you are. Well, then why are you in school? Like, why do I have to do homework if I'm absolutely perfect the way I am? What improvement do I have to do? Instead, you should tell young people, this is more to young men than young women, because young men are not being challenged. One of the reasons why you are so upset with the young men you have to pick from is because they're not being challenged, they have no purpose, and they've never actually had to build any sort of strength, right? And there's this phrase I wear on one of the bands I have, which is strength rejoices in the challenge. All of you should go after things that are really challenging. Now, guess what? Becoming in some corporation is actually not the most challenging thing you could do in today's America. Getting married early and having children and explaining that to all of your secular friends, that's actually a lot more challenging than going to work for some woke company in New York. So embrace what matters and what lasts and value what is eternal. Now, I'm sure there's people of all different religious viewpoints here. I believe that we have to value a transcendent order. I think that we have to value things that are bigger than just who we are as human beings. I think we have to recognize that human beings have a spirit and a soul, that there's a way and there's a way that works with how we live. And that's what the conservative movement should stand for, especially during these chaotic times. We should not be the progressive conservatives. So, for example, I think that it should be illegal, one example, illegal, that's right, not wrong, illegal to have some drag queen read some story to some 6-year-old at some library. And you kind of see this manifested in this entire transgender thing, which obviously as a Christian, I want to have empathy and mercy for those people, but from a public policy standpoint, I also want to be very clear about why are we not making the argument that's so obvious, which is what is a man and what is a woman? And obviously we know that through chromosomal development. And if I think the conservative movement, like the governor of Arkansas, anyone from Arkansas? Yeah, I'm sure there's a couple people. And he seems like a nice enough guy. He just catered to corporate interests, where he was like, you know what? I think it means to be a conservative that 8-year-olds should be able to chemically castrate themselves. Like, that's not the conservative movement. And this is important because they say, oh, no, it's liberty. I can do whatever I want whenever I want to do it. And at that point, we've just opened up the greatest discussion of what actually the conservative movement stands for. So are we a libertarian movement or are we a conservative? And by the way, there might be some libertarians here. Thank you guys for coming, by the way, because I'm super libertarian on guns, by the way. I think like we need less gun laws, not more gun laws, right? And so there's certain things I think that are really interesting there. But in general, especially in this time of confusion where you feel like you are losing social order, where you turn around and all of a sudden you have 7-year-olds that are being directly propagandized by the most socially degenerate causes imaginable, where you turn around and you say, wait a second, why is it that I was able to say this a couple years ago and I'm able to say this 2 years ago? There's some things, and I actually don't think human beings are able to sustain this for much longer, where we are saying, I need something I can count on year after year. Changing things for changing's sake is actually driving people insane. I really do. I think that the constant change, we need something that is passed down. We need something you can count on. We call this stability. By the way, men are largely supposed to be the source of stability in the traditional nuclear family. The fact that we have a bunch of metrosexual, very, very weak men in our country shows that people try to find that stability otherwise, and they look to the media, they look to Netflix, they look to social media. There is no stability there. And so in this whole argument, which I think is so bizarre, so I grew up in a I grew up in a political movement in the suburbs of Chicago where all of the liberals were dominated by women. And they had an argument, and I didn't agree with it. I agree with part of it. But their whole argument was about women's rights. You guys have heard this before. And it's the most obvious contradiction I've ever heard. Women's rights, women's rights. But if you're so into women's rights, why do you want men who think they are women, which they're wrong, to all of a sudden be able to destroy women's sports and go into women's locker rooms and go into women's bathrooms? That's the opposite of women's rights. So then they say, well, you're, whatever they call me, transphobic. I was like, well, you know what? I actually am kind of afraid of a 9-year-old girl having to go into a bathroom with a man. So yeah, call me that. Okay, I am afraid. I want to protect that young 9-year-old girl. And so they're very good at word games, obviously. That's what they do. But we have to pick the tough fights where we value what is good and what is beautiful and eternal, and we're willing to be called whatever name that is to protect that thing. And let me just tell you a piece of advice. You're never going to appease these people, okay? Ever. They're like, oh, we have to have the continually morally shifting lines. And they say, well, the key now is like, we just have to kind of be, you know, a little bit more accepting of all this. And I say, look, I'm not personally unaccepting. I think they might be nice people. But as far as a political movement and my own views and one of a political organization or whatever, a nonprofit organization, if all of a sudden I have to say, you know what, I think that it's perfectly fine that women's sports shouldn't exist, I'm not going to put up with that. And I don't think you should either. I think that, again, we notice that there are men and women, two totally different beings made in the eyes of God that need each other, and that society is able to exist with each other with masculine and feminine traits. That, by the way, if a society gets too feminine, it will get crushed. If it gets too masculine, it'll get tyrannical. That's why a society must hopefully have a balance of both, of prudence and practical wisdom, and then, of course, assertion and daring, ambition, and risk, and those things mixed together. If all of a sudden we just throw that all out, we enter into this postmodern lie where it's like, you know what, there is no difference. And by the way, if you go to college, you're probably taught this. Has anyone been taught this, that there's no difference between men and women? Has anyone been taught this? A couple hands are going up. You probably are in college. And it's such a I'm going to be honest. You don't have to overthink these things, by the way. That's one of the things that I did a couple of years ago. I always tried to overthink this stuff. It's actually, here's just some piece of advice. You actually don't have to overthink some of this stuff. You don't. You don't have to go read like 900 pages of why a man is a woman or a woman is a woman. You really don't. It's actually some of our viewpoints we can just say like, you know what? I don't need to go through your drivel. A man is a man, a woman's a woman. I think that a woman should be able to have her own competitive sports. I think women should be able to have their own events and say that they're able to have other women that they can congregate with, and that's not something that I'm going to apologize for. So you don't have to and again, I'm happy to go with the deep 35-minute explanation of exactly how chromosomes are formed and how they develop differently and all the statistics behind it. But I just think that's unnecessarily yielding very valuable time with you guys to something that, quite honestly, is a pile of drivel that is determined to deconstruct everything that we know to be true. And so the second thing is a contrarian thing that I'm going to tell you right now, which is that discipline is freedom. It's the opposite of what you're told. And so most of society right now tells you that indulgence and pursuing momentary pleasure, that's freedom. So let me tell you what we believe liberty to be. Liberty is not doing whatever you want to do whenever you want to do it. That is not liberty. Liberty is pursuing virtue without somebody getting in the way. So then you have to ask yourself the question, what is virtue? Well, then we have a really important conversation of what is good, or what is the good. And here's something that we should be unafraid to say, that there is a better way to live than other ways to live. It's better to be loyal to your spouse than unloyal to your spouse. And if all of a sudden we as conservatives say, you know what, we're not going to take positions on that, that's garbage. That's absolute garbage. No, if you make a covenant in front of God that you get married and you break that, we as a conservative movement should say, no, we don't support that. I'm not going to say you should make it illegal, but we should say we don't support that. If all of a sudden we're going to be indifferent to the most important issues of our time, for example, let me give you another example. In the traditional, like the secular view of liberty, they say, you know what? If a man wants to abandon his children, it's his liberty. That's perfectly fine. Now, again, not necessarily saying the government should go after that person or the state should go after that, but if a man abandons his children, he should be ridiculed, he should be condemned, he should be mocked. That's one of the most immoral things that a person can do. And so it gets to this idea of actually if you want to live freely, you have to put restraints on yourself. The opposite of everything you're going to be told for the rest of your life in secular culture. If you actually want to live a free and fulfilling life, you have to put restraints on yourself. So it's like, you know what, maybe I'm not going to go out and drink till 3 a.m. By the way, there's a cost to that. Here's a good rule of life. Anything that makes you feel, let me be very specific the way I say this. Anything that makes you feel good in the eros sense of the Greek word in the moment usually has a cost associated with it. Let me say that again. Anything that makes you feel good in the chemical world usually has a cost associated with it. And that cost has an imprint on your soul and your spirit. Let me give you an example. Like, oh, who cares if I go do heroin? I don't think anyone here is doing heroin, right? But we know friends that are, and I've lost friends to that. And they got there because their whole worldview was about pursuing pleasure. Now, it started with weed, and they're like, oh, weed's the greatest thing ever. Again, maybe we have some marijuana smokers there. I don't really care. I would recommend you to probably stop doing that, but and I'm totally against the legalization of weed, but that's a different conversation for a different time. But I remember it. One of my really good friends started smoking weed in high school. He's like, oh, it's the greatest thing ever. You know, Bob Marley, all this stuff. You guys know those people, right? They're all into it, like all in, right? Like, you know, we've been lied to, and this is so cool. And I saw him become this, he was a super hyperactive guy, and he used to always be the first in the weight room, and he just declined. And as soon as his ultimate value was a pleasure kick, as soon as his ultimate value was pursuing a chemical rush, next thing you know, he's a drug addict and he committed suicide. Now, obviously that's a radical example, but all of you know at least 2 or 3 people like that in your local high school. I guarantee it, especially if you're in an upper middle class high school across the country. Because affluence, if you do not train children correctly and teach them correctly, they're going to go to try to pursue things that make them feel good because they don't know what is good. That's all they think in the world is just a bunch of chemical combustions, instead of actually things that value and what matter. And so instead of teaching young people self-esteem, we should be teaching them self-control. And that's one of the big lessons for you here is and the American system, you guys have heard this phrase self-government before? Of course you have. But the most important self-government is you have to be in control of your own life. Meaning you have to be able to have such an ability to control your own constitution. That's right, your constitution. And be able to be very clear about what you want and why you want it and the decisions and the choices you make. And guess what? That means you have to get really good at saying no. You have to get really good at that. Now, in this whole whatever we're living through right now, where it's like, oh, and I've reiterated this point, and I'm going to say it again, that I'm going to glorify or glamorize, and you guys saw it through Cardi B, whatever that whole thing was, which was disgusting. But that, by the way, that's just the beginning. So those of you that want children, your 5-year-olds are going to see Cardi B videos like that and think that's normal. We as conservatives should say that's reprehensible, that's disgusting, and I want nothing to do with that. That's what we as conservatives should say. Instead, some people say, well, who am I to judge? No, you should absolutely judge that kind of video. Because that sort of intimacy should be protected and preserved for 2 people that come into a union to spend the rest of their life together. Not put on network television for a 7-year-old to think that that's all of a sudden normal. And by the way, that'll create miserable people. You want to know why suicide's going up? You want to know why drug usage is going up? You want to know why social isolation and alienation is going up? It's because we proselytize and evangelize momentary kicks of dopamine pleasure without explaining how these things actually are traditionally and ancestrally supposed to be passed down. So discipline is freedom. So you've got to create rules for your life. Obviously, Jordan Peterson wrote a good book on that. Benjamin Franklin had 13 rules for life, but you've got to come up with your own. And so this is a lot easier, so men gravitate towards this easier, just so you guys know. When I give this message to men, they jump out because no one's ever told them to take responsibility. Here's where you're all different. A lot of you are actually super responsible. You are. I could tell. It's 9 a.m., you're dressed like perfectly, and you've all your makeup done, and no, seriously. So you're actually, and by the way, you see this in test scores, women mature earlier. And by the way, there's for a reason, women mature earlier because God knew that if women get married early, someone's got to look after the kids while the guy rolls out of bed to go hunt the boar to go feed the family. Right? And by the way, you're going to want that person around when an invader or someone tries to threaten your family, or when you need the direction, or all of a sudden things get really, really bad, and he has that hopefully extra ability to be able to persevere that family through that moment, God willing. Now, so you have to come up with rules for your life. And that's actually what will make you free. And this is opposite than coming up with like big aspirational goals. That's important, by the way. Trust me, I mean, we're all into goal setting here at Turning Point. Literally, we're like, we want 2,500 young conservative women. Goals are great. It's actually not going to put you to a place where you're going to have that sense of peace, where you're going to have that sense of purpose. So purpose is one of my favorite words. Purpose comes from the Greek word telos, where we get the word telescope from, which means far out in the distance, that which deserves to be desired. What is all of your telos or your purpose? And if your purpose is like, I want to go I want to go start this company, that's fine, but what is your end? That might be a means, but what is your end? And we don't talk to a lot of people about that. What actually do you want to be able to achieve, not just in the material world, but things that are going to transcend you and hopefully are going to last? And so you need to come up with rules. You need to come up with what you aren't going to do. And it might be like, hey, I'm not going to drink anymore. Or maybe it's like, I don't like this group of guys, they're a bad impact and influence on me, and I'm just going to cut them off. In the most bizarre, strange way, what I'm going to tell you today, it's what you don't do that actually is going to give you what actually is going to give you true fulfillment. And here's why. Because we live in an abundant society. We live in a place where you could have literally weed delivered to your front door. It's like, what? And somehow, oh, that's liberty. No, that's actually slavery. That's actually, a form of slavery for Media Matters watching. That's a form, it's a form of being subservient to something that actually controls you. That's not you being free. Are you kidding me? No, that's you actually not being able to have the full agency and choices, because then that chemical's actually going to be free, not you. That chemical is then going to inflict on all of your ability to actually have the highest level of fulfillment and existence and pursue what is true and beautiful and good. Okay, so the third thing is this, which is where we're going to get kind of more into less kind of life advice commencement speech, but you guys probably don't hear a lot of this anyway in your college campuses, so I just need to say all that, which is this is a really important point, which is the women of this nation need to start to rise up and take responsibility for our nation as if it was our home, because it is. This is our home. I'm going to say that again. This is not a temporary place to live and then leave. So much of what we are being taught, like some people in the conservative movement have said, and I don't think they've really thought deeply about this, they don't care about the social costs because they hide behind these abstractions. I'll give you a really short example. We were just talking about this yesterday, which is this Wall Street company coming in, buying a bunch of single-family homes, borrowing at 0% interest, called BlackRock, so that all of you, when you get married, hopefully, you're going to be priced out of the housing system. I'm just using this as one example of thousands. And some people say, well, who's to say that we should ever get involved in the transaction of an $8 trillion company coming in and buying single-family homes? Well, that's actually a really important thing for us to get involved in. You know why? For those of you that rent and not own, you're not building long-term equity. You're much less likely to actually care about the nation or the place that you're in when you rent. And I believe that if you shoveled your own snow, there was not one person who shoveled their own snow who voted for Joe Biden in America. I'd like to find that person. Seriously. Because all of a sudden you take ownership for what's around you. It's not some HOA. It's not the tragedy of the commons. And so we have to have a public policy mandate to care about the well-being of the nation. Now, if you guys say, you know what, Charlie, America's like every other country. I don't care about the sacrifices of George Washington, Hamilton, Madison, John Quincy Adams, Frederick Douglass, the Civil War, the Bill of Rights, George Mason, the Constitution, being able to beat the British, the War of 1812, Civil War, I think I said Abraham Lincoln, I'll say it again, Abraham Lincoln, Teddy Roosevelt. I don't really care about our ability to win 2 world wars. I'm indifferent. This is just a temporary home. I'll move to Singapore. Then that's a libertarian idea. What conservatives need to say is, no. We actually care about this 3-tied knot. It's a 3-tied knot of a promise of honoring those who came before us, caring about what happens right now, and then building something meaningful for those who have yet to come. That's what conservatives should stand for. And so what does that mean? It means that we have to have a balance. And I love markets. I think markets are great. I can't stand socialism, and I love entrepreneurs. And those of you that want to be entrepreneurs, I really hope you succeed. And I hope that it's a means to hopefully an end of you building something meaningful, which hopefully is a family, having lots of children. And I love entrepreneurs, and I love creating something out of nothing. With that being said, if all of a sudden we say, you know what, because we love entrepreneurs and we love private property and we love markets, it's a good thing that we bring in piles of plastic from China and we never ask the question of whether or not it's actually hurting our nation. That's a bad thing for America. It's made China infinitely richer, and we don't make vitamin C in America anymore. We don't make personal protection equipment in our country anymore. We've deindustrialized the entire Midwest sector of America, 15 million jobs, and it's bad for everybody. And they say, well, it's made us wealthier. Let me prove to you that's a lie. How many of you have shirts, clothes, textiles, piles of plastic of things that you've never worn or worn once that you give away and that you're just like, I have no attachment to this? I have like entire rooms full of that stuff. You have garage sales. You have self-storage units. How much when you move into a college dorm room, there's stuff where you're like, I'm bringing it, but I'm probably never going to wear this stuff? Of course. We have an abundance issue in our country. That doesn't make us wealthier. That means we have more physical stuff that we have no attachment to. Meanwhile, when you go drive to school, when you go move into school, maybe you go to Baylor, maybe you go to UT Austin, maybe you go to University of Oklahoma, you drive by abandoned factories that used to make that stuff that actually used to be better quality, you used to value it, and you know your fellow countryman was actually employed when that was being made. We're not getting wealthier. And so we need to be very clear that this beautiful country we've been given, the United States of America, is our home. And we have to be unafraid and unapologetic to say, you know what? It's a cool thing that all of a sudden that all these Wall Street bankers are able to make all this money and what, fine. God bless you guys. You guys, work really hard, fine. But if we're not having a discussion of, are we actually leaving this republic for our children and grandchildren? That was the question the greatest generation asked. That was the question that they asked. This current generation, that our ruling class, they don't care. They would never storm Normandy Beach. This current ruling class generation is a bunch of cowards. They have no courage. They have no concern for the rest of their country. And this kind of idea of we want to pass something on is a lot of pressure on all of you. Because you know what the easy way out is? I'm going to live my own life. I don't care about the needs, wants, and concerns of anyone around me. I'm going to make a bunch of money, and if I have to move to Wuhan, China, I will. That's not going to work for me. I'm not going to sit idly by while the country that every major war that my family fought in, this country that has been the most moral country ever to exist in the history of the world, most benevolent, most opportunity, most protective of rights, the most protective of how God naturally made us in constitutional rights. We're just going to kind of sit down and be indifferent and be like, you know what? I'm not going to do anything because I think it's wrong to have bold and dramatic action, but I'm not going to win the argument and lose the country. I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to say, here's what matters. Here's what I value. Here's what I know is always going to be right. And now we have to build broad-based coalitions to try to get that done. Because you know what? The other side is willing to do whatever it takes. And we know that. They are willing to kick you out of your sororities. They are willing to go after you on social media and call you every nasty name imaginable. They are willing to say that if you're a neighbor that voted for President Trump, that you're the worst person ever to exist in the history of the world. They're playing for keeps. And all I'm suggesting is that we have to all of a sudden value this as more than just a temporary experiment. Like, oh, this was America had a nice run at it. Man, what do you think Dwight D. Eisenhower and his generation would think of that? Anyone have relatives that fought in World War II? So I don't know if any of them are living anymore. I did too. What would they think about this current leadership class? They would be horrified. You're exactly right. Because you know why? They dropped everything under this idea of strong national unity, pursuing a moral good to try to wipe the earth of a certain form of evil in two different hemispheres. It's pretty extraordinary. And that's not the only time that has happened, but that was a moment where a nation really banded together for a moral good. Now it's all about temporary consumerism. Who cares about the nation? We can go do this somewhere else. And that's not true. If America falls, the world will go into a 1,000-year abyss. Let me say that again. If America falls, the world will go into a 1,000-year darkness. This is so rare what we have here. And so we are the greatest nation ever to exist in the history of the world. But yeah, of course you should applaud that. But we're the greatest nation not just because of the output. We are the most charitable, we are the most benevolent, we're the most willing to help people in terms of natural disaster, we've created more wealth, all that. But we're the greatest country ever because we have the greatest moral claim to government. And this is where we as conservatives must be clear about this. We believe in self-government. We believe in checks and balances, independent judiciary, and consent to the government. But why do we believe those things? We believe those things because we know how a creator, you could believe God, or maybe it was an act of randomness, whatever you believe, I believe it was a God, made us a certain way, with consciousness, with life, with the capacity to pursue virtue, and that we do not want a tyrannical government or anyone to be able to get in the way of us pursuing virtue. That's a moral claim. So why is it that we have a check and balance? Because the Founding Fathers feared that someone could get in the way of you going to church. Why is it that all of a sudden we have consent to the governed? You can't do bold, dramatic, and revolutionary stuff without our permission. Why is it that we have this expanse over space and time? And let me just say, we are a republic, not a democracy. If I have to hear that we're a democracy one more time, I'm going to lose my mind. okay? Let me tell you the difference. A democracy would be if we took an up and down vote in this room, get rid of the First Amendment, it would get done. A republic has very clear, public, and eternal truths that if you're going to get rid of them, you need to have more than just 51%. It's a long, deliberate process. And here's the thing. The preamble of the Constitution has never changed. Why? That's pretty amazing when you think about it, right? The preamble is the same then as it is now. It's because the Founding Fathers did not write the Constitution for the times. They wrote it to stand the test of time. Because they wrote it, they didn't write it about current conflicts. They didn't write it, no, they wrote it for you, and they wrote it for a people 100 years from now. How is that possible? Because times change, people don't. Our human nature is going to keep on replicating itself. So they wrote this on eternal truths. And that's why you should go pursue things that are eternal, not things that are momentary. So not TikTok, instead maybe the book of Thessalonians. Not Snapchat. But those things are actually what develop your soul and your character and your spirit. Not like, oh yeah, we're so evolved because and this is the postmodern lie that a lot of you hear on college campuses. Like, we are now postmodern human beings because we have planes. Like, okay. All technology does is allow you to do bad things quicker and more efficiently. And it could do good things too, by the way. I mean, I think it creates bad habits, and I'll get to that in a second because I've become like super anti-technology. But I'll get to that in a second. But this nation that we have was conceived so that you can govern yourself. Conceived so that you can pursue things that are true and beautiful and wondrous and good. It was conceived so that you are able to build things that last. And so this is all under attack. It's under attack from a variety of different reasons. People think that they're doing good with good intentions, like, oh yeah, I'm just trying to have equity, this ridiculous new word that they're using. Equity means redistribution. Equity means forced redistribution. Here's the way equity works. It's the easiest thing in the world. It's based, and they're already doing this, by the way. It means getting rid of grading. It's all, like, that's the greatest way I can explain it. It's like the A student should get the same grade as the kid who never shows up. That's equity. They want that for the entire country. And the way that they value it is based on race. So they say, okay, the white kids, you now get a C. The black kids, you get a C. Who cares about any sort, how hard you worked or how much you studied? That's equity. Forced redistribution. And some of them think that they're doing the right thing. Some of them think that America's this systemically racist country, which, by the way, might be the greatest lie that I hear on television ever. We are the least racist country ever to exist in the history of the world. And I could get into that. You guys have heard that on my podcast plenty of times. I've kind of navigated that. But we are the greatest nation ever to exist. And I just want you guys to have this moment of gratitude at some point throughout this conference, that you were born into this nation, and you can actually do something about it. I want you to think about that, though, that you just happened by God's providence or by an act of randomness, whatever your metaphysics are, that you were born into this nation that has been unlike any other. And so then the question is, what are we called to do about that? Well, some people think that if you're given a gift, you have no moral claim to ever say thank you. These are the people that get gifts and they're all this, and they're just like constantly walking around. They're like, I deserve all of this. Do you guys think you're entitled to live in America? That's an interesting question. No. We actually don't deserve how good we have it here, because most of the rest of the world has it. We have people that think they're entitled to live in the country, and some of those people are conservatives. Some of them are people like, oh yeah, I'm such a good person, and of course, this stuff's always going to be this way. Let me tell you right now, America won't always be what we know it if we don't take bold and dramatic action. We are very fragile right now. Very fragile. And so, here's another thing that is important. A lot of you are going to be fired up to make a difference after this conference. And that's important. Start a Turning Point chapter. Maybe you're going to, tell your friends all your beliefs. You're going to have new friends. I'm going to tell you something that is true, but a lot of people don't want to hear. But it's important I tell you. If you make a commitment to actually want to make a difference, it's impossible to make a meaningful difference without you actually bearing a cost. It's going to cost you. You will lose friends. You will get kicked out of social groups. You might lose your job, and you might get graded differently. That sounds wonderful, right? It's true, though. I'm not in the business of lying to people. But let me tell you what it will do. It will create you to be a stronger, more confident human being with character that is that you've never understood before, that is, for yourself. It will give you true friendships for a lifetime. I'm going to talk about friendship in a second, which you guys are all going to love. And it's going to give you true community and purpose. People ask me all the time, Charlie, if I have a professor, I'm sure all of you guys have this situation, and I have a contrarian view on this, where people say, Charlie, I have a professor, if I write what I believe, I'm going to get a C, but if I just repeat the pablum, I'm going to get an A. What do I do? And I say, this is a perfect ethical question. So basically what you're saying is, do I lie to get a good grade, or do I tell the truth to bear a cost? So some people that are in punditry say, oh, you should lie and just submit it and get through with it. Okay, if you think career advancement and getting grades is your ultimate good, then you should do that. If you think getting grades is what matters and what lasts, if you think that on your gravestone it says, you know, Cynthia Jones, she got good grades. If you think that's what matters, then do that. I actually encourage you to lie your way to be valedictorian. I encourage you to go cheat your way to be, by the way, why not just cheat at that point? Some people in the conservative movement say that. I have a different view. What I did, and by the way, of course it cost me when I was in high school, is that I say, look, if you lie small, you lie big. The small things are the big things. And you can grade me differently, you can push me backwards, it's going to make me a stronger person, but I'm going to be more free than anyone else. I'm not going to be a slave to this like false essay I submitted to my professor. I'm not going to write this pablum. And people say, well, Charlie, I need to go to law school. You don't understand. I need to get A's. Okay, that's your ultimate good then. Career advancement, checking boxes, momentary pleasure, that's what matters to you. I think telling the truth and being strong and confident and never, ever wavering to the cultural arbitrage, I think that matters a lot more than becoming some lawyer at some corporate law firm. And so what will make a difference will cost you. And things are only going to start to change when people that have something to lose are going to start to all of a sudden take dramatic action and be willing and honest that they're going to lose it. If you guys want to be free, then all of a sudden say, I don't care what they take away from me because I know the truth and the truth will set me free. That's if you guys want to always be looking over your shoulder, the least free, I get people that come up to me all the time, Charlie, how are you able to say all these things? I'm like, what are they going to cancel me from? What article are they going to write in the New York Times that they already haven't written? Right? I know what I believe. I know what's true. I know who I love. I know whose I am. And so, fine, come after me. I don't care. But what I would never want to do is kind of have some sort of corporate oligarchy over me, be like, if you dare say this, you're not going to get a promotion. Man, that is a modern day form of control. That is social control. And all of you here, in one way or the other, are falling victim under social control. And it's not your fault. It might be social control of a teacher, of a friend, of a boss, of a community, where you're like, I'm less likely to say these things. I'm less likely to do this sort of stuff. And that's where a lot of the prayer and the reflection has to happen. But here's the cool thing. So there are 3 different types of friendship. And this is why the best friends will be made at this conference. So the first type I'm going to tell you what. Aristotle said there's 3 different types of friendships. The first type of friendship is the type of friendship where you're doing business together. The best example I can use for young ladies here, you kind of get assigned to a group project in school. All right, you got to work with this guy, get it done. You have a goal, and you're like, oh yeah, I had fun with them, and I recognize them in the hall. Are those people really your friends? Well, maybe. I mean, that's a form of friendship, right? The second form of friendship is where you have some form of a purpose a little bit bigger than yourself. Think of sports, right? Sports would be one, where you're trying to achieve a goal, and it's more than just the group project, and you're going after that goal. The ultimate form of friendship is what happens here, where it's the type of friendship where friends rarely look at each other, and they're kind of uncomfortable talking about each other because they're too busy looking at the same unified ultimate purpose. So that's what all of you have here. The reason why real friendships are going to be born here is because you're not just caring about getting a business deal done or getting some sort of goal done. No. You're actually worried about something that's bigger than yourself. So you know when you walk through this room, you turn to a fellow young lady, you know she shares your values. You know that for the first time maybe ever, you're filled around an entire room of thousands of people that are looking at the same thing as you are. I want to save the country and I'm willing to do something about it. And that's transcendent. That's bigger than everyone here. And those types of friendships, by the way, are rarely found at most liberal colleges and universities. Let me say it, rarely. They can be found. The best friendships are the ones where you agree on the same big picture things and you're both trying to do something about it. And so if you say, I'm going to lose all these friends if I speak out, you're right. You will. You will be bullied and you will be thrown, all this stuff. And by the way, I'm not trying to, intimidate you against this. I just never want you to leave this conference, be full of energy and enthusiasm to go do this stuff, and all of a sudden you're going to pay the price and they're like, Turning Point lied to me. No. I'm telling you that it's a cost, and that's the sacrifice that we have to make. But then the back end of it, you'll be stronger and more fulfilled, more fired up, more energetic. You'll be tougher, more resilient. And guess what? You're a lot tougher than you think. You're a lot tougher than you think. And so I was going to take questions, but I'm actually going to do that Sunday, just questions on Sunday. I do want to do a shameless plug. If everyone here is subscribed to our podcast that isn't already subscribed, we would beat Rachel Maddow on the podcast charts, which I would love to be able to say the Young Women's Leadership Summit in Dallas beat Rachel Maddow in the New York Times in the podcast charts. So thank you. Right, Reagan? Every single phone has a podcast app, Apple Podcast, Spotify. If you guys subscribe, I would be personally blessed to that. And we talk about these ideas in great depth every single day. So let me close with a couple things, which is, I'm going to go through this list again. Embrace what matters and what lasts. Value what is eternal, what is divine. These are hard questions, by the way. Maybe you're like, I don't know what lasts. By the way, I think we have some elementary school kids here. My friend Rita wanted me to call. I think we have some elementary school kids here somewhere. There's an amazing 9-year-old. How are you? Glad you're here. Thank you for being here. How old are you? 9? 9 years old. 9 years old. Give it up. That's amazing. And maybe you're like, I don't know what is eternal or what lasts. That's okay. The first thing you have to do is say, I want to try to understand that a little bit. I'm going to go after that. By the way, that's what college used to do. College, which is, I'm not exactly a fan of in a lot of times. Unless you go to Hillsdale, then great. Anyone go to Hillsdale here? Hillsdale, awesome. Then you know all this stuff, yeah. No, she's like, no, I don't. That's funny. But what college used to do is like, they would stand in a room like this, and they'd say, there's a lot we don't understand in this world, but we know some things are more beautiful than others. We know some things are true, and we know some things are worthy of wonder. Let's find out what that means together. They would tease you to go on this journey throughout college to go pursue things bigger than you. You know how college works today? They'd come up and they'd say, these are my preferred pronouns, and zim, zers, like, meat is the enemy, men are terrible, God is dead, white people are the problem. They have some weird like pride flag and BLM thing, and they're screaming and they're angry. And basically the essence of their point is there is no truth, there is no beauty, there is no wonder. All that matters is that we're a bunch of cells that can make ourselves feel good, go and have like sex week on campus and go pursue nihilism. And instead, I'm going to teach you how to be a revolutionary so you can find purpose in the midst of all this. That's what they do on campus. And you see that now manifested, of course, in Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is one example of that, and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, who are constantly looking for the next upheaval. You see, in college, they train you to try to create upheaval. When in reality, we should train you to preserve what's good. We should train you to pursue things that matter, not upheaval the entire society, which is what AOC tries to do every single day. Which, by the way, I just want to say, it was one of the most amazing things we participated in, the Matt Walsh Daily Wire thing. I don't know if you guys saw this or not. It was hilarious. And where she does not care about her grandmother to want to accept $100,000. No, she doesn't. And again, so she drives a Tesla. She has like the nicest apartment in D.C., never sends any money to her grandmother who's living in slum-like conditions in Puerto Rico, right? In Puerto Rico. She goes down and visits. She does a social media post to tell the world and show the world, blaming Donald Trump, even though Donald Trump gave a lot of aid. And the most obvious question is, wait a second, why are you driving a Tesla living in the nicest building in D.C. while your grandmother's literally living in the slums? And then we raised $100,000 to help her abuela, and she doesn't want the money. I mean, there's There might be some ethical things there. What kind of person doesn't want $100,000 for their grandmother? Anyway, so, but it's so sociopathic. She's so narcissistic, and she's so always upheaval, right? No matter what the incident is, it's the system that's the problem. And you know what she doesn't have? She has never been told that she needs to have self-government. Think about it. Instead of saying, oh my gosh, how did I let my grandmother live like this? Oh my goodness, I'm a bad person. And by the way, we all make mistakes. I'm not saying like, I'm just saying like that's the immediate thought when she walked through her grandmother's mind should have been like, I don't have my own house in order. The immediate thought when she walked through her grandmother's mind should have been like, I'm going to give you money. We're going to make this right. I'm so sorry. Instead, she said, how dare President Trump do this to my grandmother? And quite honestly, I feel bad for her because she never heard this speech I just gave, which is like, actually, you have to get your own house in order. You have to control your own, and then you have to, and then let's go through these rules. You have to value what matters and what lasts. Family matters and lasts. And so for her, like, well, why would I take care of my grandmother? The government does that. No. That's literally what matters and what lasts. Is taking care of, remember, what came before, what's happening now, and what's about to come. And the definition of that would be grandparents. I love grandparents. I'm very pro-grandparents. And yet, but for her, it's like, well, no, that's government's role. I'm going to go ride my Tesla and save the world. Now, that's one small example, just a small good example, I think, of the propaganda drivel you guys are all being fed. And the opposite should have been, no, I actually want to preserve and protect something that lives longer than me. Remember, discipline is freedom. You got to come up with your own rules. Everyone's rules will be different, but there's only like 20 rules you could possibly come up with that are all kind of the same. Which is like, maybe I have to pursue humility. Maybe I need to lie less. Maybe I need to be more honest with who I am front-facing. Maybe social media is making me a bad person. Maybe by the way, if you're spending more than 3 hours of screen time a day, you have a problem. Let me just be clear. 3 hours, you got a problem. You've basically said, I am an owned subsidiary of people that don't share my values, that hate me, and but only addictive drugs and social media call the people that use their products users. And by the way, what kind of weird thing that we have, like, oh yeah, I'm a follower of Cardi B. So you're not a leader? You understand the social tricks that all these companies are doing? They have neuroscientists that sit in a room to try to say, how do I make 17-year-old girls more addicted to think horrible about themselves, not have value, not find truth, but stare at their screen for meaning? But remember, the camera goes two ways, by the way. Everything you say and do, they're recording and they hear if you have the phone with you, just so you guys know. And it's designed to make you an unhappy, deeply troubled person and not actually value human contact. My wife and I were on our honeymoon. We did no phones. At the most unbelievable sunsets you could imagine. Thank you. Most unbelievable sunsets you could imagine. And I looked to my right, and a whole family was just looking at their phones, ignoring the sunset. I looked to my left, the whole family was looking at their phones, looking at the sunset. I thought to myself, you couldn't see a more beautiful landscape if you tried. And they're just basically saying, I want these devices to have a higher hierarchy. Anyway, that's a little bit of a side note. Maybe the discipline is I have to wake up earlier. Maybe the discipline is I have to cut people out of my life, which, by the way, is a good practice to do if people are just terrible to you and they don't make you feel content or at peace. And then finally, remember, this country, this is our home. This is not a temporary place to live and leave. If you think this is a temporary place, then you might want to get out because it's about to get a little bit turbulent. But for those of us that honor the sacrifice that came before, for those of us that know what this nation actually is, and we want to raise children and grandchildren here, then we know that there's going to be a little bit of a struggle. We know that, and we're going to win this struggle, by the way. Let me be very clear. We're going to win this struggle. And we're not leaving. We're not just going to kind of pull a cord and get out if things get tough. But we have to be very clear about that. So let me close with this. When the women of America have rose up, there is no stopping that. Men are always looking for fights, right? Like whatever. That's kind of, and I'm Scottish, so I'm always looking for fights, right? It's just in my DNA. If there's an injustice, I'm like front row. School board meetings, protests, like that's just who I am, right? A lot of Scots-Irish kind of, I've always done that. Ronald Reagan was Scots-Irish. But when women, the ones that are usually less likely to get into conflict, the ones that are a little less likely to want to get into altercations, the ones that want to be agreeable, that want to be peacemakers, counselors, right? We kind of go back to this idea of who you are as God made you. You want to try to bring people together. When that snaps, and you're like, no. This is my home. You're not going to be teaching critical race theory. No more of this transgender garbage. No more of this false history. You're not going to take our guns. No more teaching our 9-year-olds this. When the women rise up, watch out. So I want you to remember this. No pressure. with 2,500 young women here, the future of this country is literally on you. The men are going to fight no matter what. Like, we got that all fired up. I got men, they're like, where do I go? Like, okay, wait, I got to harness that, right? I got it, okay? This is a little bit different, where it's like, I want to do it correctly. I want to do it agreeably. And that's all good stuff. You're going to have the best speakers in the world. But if you make that commitment, especially the moms out there, my goodness, to rise up and to get into the fight, I'm telling you right now, the greatest weapon to win is the women of America. And when all of you decide that we're going to win and that this is our home, I'm telling you right now, victory will be ours. God bless you guys. Thanks so much.
Ladies, I'm so happy to be here with you guys. My name is Annabelle Rutledge, and I have the honor and privilege of being the National Director of Young Women for America. Yes. If for those of you that are not familiar with Young Women for America, I work with a bunch of girls that are just like you all, who are motivated, high school and college students, who are motivated first and foremost by our faith in Jesus Christ. And out of that faith and conviction comes a passion for preserving the conservative Christian values that our nation was founded upon. We do that through prayer, education, and action, and you can see the 7 core issues that we focus on the screen behind me. So listen, you're going to hear from a host of amazing speakers. You already have yesterday, this morning. And I was thinking, what can I share with these ladies? And I had, Charlie was just talking about inspiration. We get inspired, and then what? You come to these conferences, you hear the speakers, and you leave, and what's next? So I wanted to just share 3 next steps for you all as you move forward and this weekend progresses. So the first is dive deeper. 2, get connected, and 3, take action. So 1, dive deeper. This is where we check and test our inspiration, the things that we're intaking. Romans 12:2 tells us, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, so that by testing you can discern the will of God, what is good, acceptable, and perfect. At Young Women for America, we take everything to the Bible first, and then from there we dive deeper to educate ourselves. We want to come alongside you and do that. So when someone asks you, well, Planned Parenthood is necessary, they provide comprehensive health care for women, or Jerusalem's stolen land, Israel needs to give it back, or it's not compassionate to deny transgenderism. You know what you believe. Can you give that 30-second response, and then can you back it up? Because the worst kind of activist is an uninformed activist. We saw that here in Dallas with the girl who switched out her speech to argue about her right to abortion. She has a voice, but she's uninformed. So we want to come alongside you. We have resources on all 7 of our issues. So first, dive deeper. 2, get connected, but get connected to the right people. I can't stress this enough, you guys. The number one thing I hear from our leaders is how grateful they are for the friendships and the community they've found in their fellow leaders. I don't have to tell you that there is a war being waged for the hearts and minds of young people in this country. You experience it every day. I do want to remind you that we're not just fighting against flesh and blood. We are fighting against rulers, authorities, and spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. You need your battle buddies, and we have that at Young Women for America. Strong, conservative, Christian women who build one another up and encourage one another in the Lord, as 1 Thessalonians tells us to do. So if you are hungry for mentorship, discipleship, I know that even in the conservative movement, it can be hard to find those solid Christian sisters to stand in the gap with you and fight with you. We have a table in the back. We would love to connect with you. You'll also see a link here at the bottom of the screen where you can come to our training. It's not a conference, it's a hands-on training, communications training, how to build relationships with senators, how to lobby, what does it mean to actually move the ball on legislation. We would love to, I personally invite all of you to apply. We would love to have you at the end of August. Okay, so the third thing, take action. So you're getting inspired, check, you're here. If you aren't already, you will be by the end of this conference. From there, we dive deeper. We do that first by fighting our battles on our knees, and then educating ourselves so we have the answers. 2, get connected to the right people, and 3, take action. Young Women for America leaders have lobbied at the Capitol. They have shared their stories outside of the Supreme Court. They've signed letters to governors. They are rally speakers. They have done door knocking for voter registration. They have spoken at cities across our country at our Women for Kavanaugh and Women for Amy buses. They are bold, they are brave, they're courageous, and they're loving, which is so needed, you guys. It's so important that we be compassionate and loving in our responses and firm on truth. Young Women for America is not women talking about women's issues. We are a women's voice on policy issues that impact all people. And we actually have a 42-year history of training and equipping grassroots to pray, educate, and act. We are strong women with smart policies, solid theology, and no apologies. So if this sounds like you, visit our booth, Young Women for America, in the lobby. Apply to come to our training. We want to be your battle buddies. Have a great weekend, ladies.
Yes, y'all, the one and only, get up.
What a great crowd. I am so honored to be here. Thank you, Charlie Kirk, for inviting me to join these fabulous American women at this wonderful Turning Point event. My name is Cynthia Lummis. I am the first woman United States Senator from the great state of Wyoming. I just couldn't be happier than to see all of these conservative young women who are going to be the future leaders of America's conservative and libertarian movements. We are grateful that you would take the time to come here. We are honored to present to you because when we look at you, we know that you have the values, those core, solid American values that are under threat every day, and then it takes people with new energy, new ideas embedded in our core American values to save our country. That is you. I thank you for being here, and I honor your commitment to the United States of America and to our fabulous Constitution. Now, my home state of Wyoming knows a little bit about what it takes to be America's first state for women's rights. That's exactly right. Thank you. Wyoming was the first government in the world to continuously grant women the right to vote. The first woman voter, Louisa Swain, voted in 1870. That is 50 years before the 19th Amendment to the Constitution allowed other states the right to vote. This happened when Wyoming was still a territory. We had not only the first woman voter, but the first woman grand juror, the first woman bailiff, the first woman all-city council. We had the first woman governor in the nation, the first woman elected to statewide office. We had the first women delegates to the Republican and Democrat national conventions. When Wyoming became a state in 1890, before the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, national leaders said, we'll let you in, but you have to deny women the right to vote. You can't become a state and still allow women the right to vote. And thankfully, the leaders of Wyoming said, we're not coming in without the women. So here we are, ladies, with a tremendous opportunity to lead our country. And although it took a long time for my state of Wyoming to finally elect a woman U.S. Senator, you are in a position to make huge strides in your communities, your county commissions, your state legislatures, your school boards, and yes, in Congress and even in the White House. And with your values and the support of each other, I can rest assured when I decide to go door to door for you, even if it's on a walker, that you're going to support the values I cherish, we cherish, and that the founders of our nation cherished. So again, congratulations on your work. Now, I'm not sure what inspired you to be here today. When I was young, I didn't see politics in my future. But when I was a senior studying animal science, agriculture at the University of Wyoming, I needed some humanities credits to graduate. So I got a 4-credit internship at the Wyoming legislature. I'd never been to the Wyoming legislature. As an intern, I fell in love with the Wyoming legislature. I saw committed people doing the best they could for their counties, their districts, and our state. And I wanted to be part of it. So just 2 years later, I ran for the legislature and won. And it opened up all these doors of things I didn't even know I would be curious about, but it is such an exciting intellectual exercise. But it's important that that intellectual exercise be pursued by people who have good core understandings of our founding, of the rationale. As you know, I think that the United States really looks like an upside-down pyramid, with the federal government on the bottom and the states and the people on the top. The federal government was created to guarantee our rights and protect our rights that were given by God and embodied in the U.S. Constitution. And the states were to be the primary level of government to protect and carry out those rights. If you look at where we are today, it is as if that pyramid has gotten flipped, and the federal government thinks it's on top, and that we, the people, and we, the states, serve the federal government. That is not the way it was planned. That is not the way it is to be. You can change it. You can protect the founders' vision for our country. I came back to Washington. I'd served 8 years in the House, went back home, resumed my life in ranching and in the practice of law, and I watched our government continue to spend and spend money we don't have on things we don't need and that we cannot afford, putting our future and your futures at risk. So when the opportunity arose to fill the seat left vacant by my retiring Senator Mike Enzi, I chose to run. It took a long campaign, But we were successful in getting to the point where I was sworn in on January 3rd. Nobody could be there. During COVID, we couldn't have guests. The next day, Republicans lost Georgia, and in doing so lost the majority in the US Senate. So then there became this big authority-sharing struggle going on. It took days to resolve. January 6th came about. And after January 6th, Democrats would look at people like me as if we had the word insurrectionist painted across our foreheads. And that's the way it was in Washington for the first many months of this year. So we had to use our ability to get away from the masks, away from the prison walls around the United States Capitol building, and just sit down and visit with our colleagues. So I began scheduling meetings with my Senate colleagues to get to know them in both parties. Fortunately, I had served in the House with a large number of Democrats who knew me from those days in a different context where we were working together, where we were working across the aisle. And so I started with them and then soon added people that seemed willing to sit down with a so-called insurrectionist. And you know, we began to get past it. Things began to thaw, but it takes a lot of work at a time when, I'm telling you, the Democrats miss Donald Trump with all their hearts. They loved to hate him so much that when he was not around every day to hate on, to spew venom and vile at, they turned it to other Republicans. They lost the person they most loved to hate. For Republicans, President Trump left an agenda of hope for working people. He left hope for a border that is protected just as the Constitution proposed. He left hope for a world that respects the United States. He left a strong military that is not deployed for reasons that defy being able to articulate a mission. He wants our people where the objectives are clear, where the mission is clear, and we can accomplish our goals. We all have the mantle of the America First agenda, which is the best mantle for working Americans. When I was home in Wyoming during the Trump presidency, every age group, both genders, all races saw employment opportunity, salary increases, hope, value, respect, and love for our country. That is in the 4 short years that President Trump was embattled every day by lying mainstream media and by lying Democrats who undermined his agenda from day one. But that agenda lives on because he was so committed. When I was in the House, I was the founding members of the House Freedom Caucus. And as I have watched my fellow founding members go out and pursue other interests and other duties in our government, I'm so proud that they took the America First agenda with them. Mick Mulvaney was head of OMB for President Trump and Chief of Staff. Mark Meadows was Chief of Staff and is now deeply involved in the Conservative Policy Institute to save the America First agenda. Ron DeSantis, one of them. I'm with you there. I think Ron DeSantis is one of the most remarkable, successful, America-loving governors. Jim Bridenstine was the head of NASA for President Trump. Jim Bridenstine was a founding member of the Freedom Caucus. Ken Buck is writing great books about our values, our agenda, and continues to serve in the United States Congress. Honestly, the list goes on, and that can be you. What I want to say, I was there with him. I think I'm the first member of the Freedom Caucus to be elected to the U.S. Senate, but there are more coming. There are more coming. I want to say to you, you are looking, when you look at me, you're looking at your future. And when I look at you, I'm looking at America's future. So stay involved. Be involved. If you're helping on someone else's campaign, if you're helping with an issue that is where your heart is, if you're helping your state party, your county party, if you're not into parties, but you really are concerned about the fact that our schools weren't open because of teachers' unions, thereby making mothers and dads stay home with their children, thereby being unable to complete some of their work duties. Some of what happened during the pandemic with regard to employment was unnecessary, and it was created falsely. Now I'm finally going to look at the speech that I brought for the first time. According to the Pew Research Center, more than 2 million working mothers lost their jobs during the pandemic, and in March of this year, nearly 1.5 million were still out of the workforce. That shows you how impactful the decisions were by governors who didn't do what Ron DeSantis did, who didn't do what Kristi Noem did. In South Dakota, Governor Kristi Noem kept things open. And boy, she took a beating for it. But her strong commitment to her state, sticking to her guns, was of such a huge benefit to South Dakota that their unemployment rate is extremely low. Their economy is extremely robust. States are the great incubators of innovation. They are the source of good ideas. And Ron DeSantis and Kristi Noem are two of the governors that we should be so grateful have taken their commitment to principle and executed it in their states. Kristi Noem said, "I don't feel it's the government's job to decide which businesses are essential and which are non-essential." That's common sense. That's just intuitive. How could other states get it so wrong when Kristi Noem got it so right? The importance of family in our lives cannot be underestimated. It's inestimable. And yet, what we're seeing from the Biden administration is efforts to make the family less relevant in the pursuit of values, in the pursuit of education. They want educators being the ones who are the primary teachers of children, thereby dismissing the core values and competence of the family unit. They want us to be a social democracy like the countries of Eastern Europe, or maybe even socialist governments. Some of the principles they are articulating sound creepily and eerily like socialism, and that's because it is. So call it out, call it out. Don't let it go unaddressed. You are in a unique position, in a unique country, the most unique in the history of the world, to take your life, your commitment to values, and make it into something that contributes greatly to our country. You know, there was a Jewish businessman who was a patriot at the time of the founding of our country. And he had been a very wealthy man, been very successful in the United States, at a time when the Continental Army didn't have the money to function. And so the founders of our country went to him and said, "Would you help us?" And in his heart of patriotism, he gave great amounts of money to keep our Continental Army functioning, to help keep our government functioning under the onslaught of the great British government. When he died, and people went to honor him for his commitment to our government, they found out he was absolutely penniless. He had nothing left. He gave every ounce of his net worth, his personal worth, to the commitment of the United States. When you think of people like that, and then you think about the small amount that's being asked of us as Americans in the 21st century, the richest people that have ever lived on the face of the earth, regardless of whether you are rich or poor, we are still richer than everyone. We look back at people like him and say, may I have the same blessed commitment that you did to this country. I want to thank you and encourage you. God bless you. God bless our country. Have a great convention. Thank you.
Just tell me what to do. Okay. Nice work.
Great job. I am. Yeah.
We are.
Okay.
Hi. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the Bushes.
Bush squared.
All right, look at this room. I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. We hear from Dr. Fauci all the time to trust the science, right? Trust the science. I'm a scientist. 2 studies came out a little while ago, and they're scientific and medical journals, and they said conservatives are better looking. So I'm going to trust that science, and that's a fact. So, ladies and gentlemen, the Bushes, as I said.
Everybody.
And we have 3 attorneys on stage, but they're much more accomplished than I. And
That's a scary thought.
No, it's a factual thought. And they're here from Austin, and we're grateful that you could be here today. Thank you so much.
Good to be with you.
Yes. So I want to start with Amanda. You're a working mother and an attorney and a conservative, thank goodness.
Yeah.
And what message do you have for young conservatives? What do you think are the biggest issues facing the young women today?
Well, I would say just to, work hard. That's one of the things that I grew up doing from a small town in West Texas, and, persevere. It's difficult, and it's a balancing act always to be a working woman and a mother and a conservative. But those things should not be mutually exclusive. And it takes a village, but there are days where I feel like I'm nailing it in one area and I'm not doing so great maybe in another area, but it all balances out, and just work hard and pursue what you want to do, and people will be there to support you.
That's very valid points. And as young women today, we see that there's really a culture war going on, and the leftists are trying to hurt our value systems and our womanhood. What other issues do you see that young people are facing sort of as attacks from the left?
Well, I think, your faith and your family are always, for me at least, number 1 and number 2. And I feel like everything else falls into place. And it's difficult when you're getting criticized by the left for those things. But at the end of the day, I think if you believe in, family, faith, and what's important to you, and stand strong, which can be difficult as a young woman, right? When you're getting criticized, from the left or from anyone. But find a good support system, find a good mentor, and explore the areas that you're passionate about, and just, doing what you're doing today, right? Coming here and finding mentors, meeting other people, finding people that you resonate with, and sharing stories.
And you spoke of passion. As we all know, you can't go to law school and survive that in the bar exam without having that passion. And I know it's hard to find when you're young. Finding that path and finding that spirit for what you believe in is hard. What is the advice you would give about finding your path and finding your voice and finding that career that really makes you feel fulfilled?
Yeah, I think that's super important. And sometimes that changes. I mean, when I went to law school, I thought I was going to do one thing and ended up doing another. Part of finding your passion is exploring different things and figuring out maybe what you don't enjoy doing, right? I mean, just as much as figuring out what you're passionate about is also figuring out what you're not passionate about. So just, be creative and go out and do a lot of things, and meet people and use other people's experiences and see what you're passionate about. But passion is super important.
It really is. And you're a working mom and a wife. And, a lot of the women here might not have children yet, but kids are probably on the horizon. What is your advice for balancing it all?
It's hard. It is not easy. Marry someone who is a true partner, because, and we were talking backstage about just really having a true partnership, because it's impossible to do it alone. George is super engaged. He comes home and he drops the phone, drops the work, and gets on the floor and plays with the kids and gives me a break. Like I said, there are days where I feel like I'm nailing it as a mom and I don't do as well at work, or vice versa. And you're probably not going to be a 10 out of 10 on both of those things every single day. And so I think I've, over the years, learned to lower my expectations of trying to be 10 out of 10 in every area. But if I can be an 8 out of 10 most days, then I feel like I'm succeeding.
That makes you a 10.
That's right.
So these questions aren't on my list, but I decided I'm going to ask you 2. Well, maybe just 1. So you married into the Bush family, which is, people might have heard of the Bushes, not the baked beans. Not those ones. Not the beer, not the baked beans, the presidential 4 generations of politics. Tell us one little inside nugget of gossip about the Bush family.
Let's see.
Just a little nugget.
An insider
like something
nugget.
from Thanksgiving, anything. Secret, right? We want some dirt.
Let's see. Okay, I'll tell you a wedding story. When George and I got married, again, I was from a small town in West Texas, a little overwhelmed with, getting married in Kennebunkport, Maine, planning the wedding, and, you have your guest list, and you invite 200 people, and, they say online, 60% will come, so invite 200, expect 140. And so I'm telling this to Barbara Bush, who I was extremely close with, and she said, now Mandy, the church holds 200, so how many are you inviting? And I said, well, I'm gonna probably invite about 250, and I think we'll be at like 150. And she looked at me and she said, Mandy, dear, you realize that if you invite them, they will come. And she was so great, but I'll never forget. And I kid you not, I think we invited 208 and 203 came. And so we actually had to add 3 additional chairs in the church. But
well, these are good problems to have.
Good problems
That's a
to
good
have.
Story. So I'm going to move on to your lovely husband
Please.
here. Do you go by commissioner? Is that your title?
George P. Y'all can
George
call
P.
me George P.
That's like a good nickname, George P.
Absolutely.
Well, it's longer than, but it's a good one. But you are the commissioner of the Texas General Land Office. So that sounds like a big title. Tell us what that means in theory.
Well, first of
or
all,
in practice.
I want to thank you all for coming out, and I want to thank Charlie Kirk for his incredible leadership. What a great patriot he is. As land commissioner, I think it's the most important agency that Texans probably haven't learned a thing about. But we serve as the chief asset manager for the people of Texas, where we generate billions of dollars for public high school students here in Texas. How many Texas high school students do we have here today?
Oh, wow.
There you go.
All right.
How many from Florida here today?
Ooh, not nice.
How many from California? All right, we won't hold that against you, but welcome to Texas. We also take care of military veterans here in the state of Texas. I'm a vet myself, served in Afghanistan. And I know very well that military spouses run the home front while we're gone, and this one ran it well. We respond to natural disasters. We take care of our state's rich history. And I was proud to support Donald Trump in 2016 and also 2020. And so I love my job, I love Texas, and I love being here.
So again, I have a question that wasn't on my list. So 2024 is a year in the future. I mean, not next year, but it's coming up in a couple of years. So if someone said VP pick, what would you say?
Boss? No, I love my role. I am announcing for Attorney General for the great state of Texas. I think we need to have a lead prosecutor that's going to confront human trafficking here in our state.
Yes.
This is the fastest growing crime in the state of Texas. And young women in Texas are not for sale. We need a lead prosecutor. Just like I did during the legislative session, I will work with human trafficking survivors, and I will shut down sexually oriented businesses in the known hubs of this trade. And as the lead prosecutor to the Johns, the pimps, and the perps, know this, that your days of sanctuary are almost over. I'm coming after you. So we'll leave VP for the highfalutin people, but we need a chief prosecutor here in Texas.
Wow. Well, the question about that trafficking is so important, and I'm glad you brought that up because that leads to the border. And those issues are obviously tied together. You are a Texan, you understand Texas, you are an attorney. Please explain to us how this is tied to the border, what's going on at the border, and what you can do to change it.
So the Biden-Harris agenda has completely failed the American people, and it's failed the state of Texas on the southern border. After I announced last week, my first trip was to the border, and I visited with Brandon Judd and the National Border Patrol Council. Brandon Judd was the advisor to President Trump on all things related to border security. And he says that we've only built 150 of the 700 miles that were appropriated for the Trump wall. We've got to finish the Trump wall.
Yeah.
So Governor Abbott announced yesterday that he will finish that wall, and that under state law, and if the feds are not going to enforce federal immigration law, then the state of Texas will enforce state trespassing law. And as Attorney General, I would prosecute those cases gladly. Second, we need to go back to the Remain in Mexico policy. This is a loophole in our asylum laws, where if you come to our country and if you are from a Northern Triangle country, you say, I am here to seek asylum, you're processed through, you're given a court appearance, maybe you show up, maybe you don't, in 3 years. And we know that that is what's leading to this large surge of illegal immigration, the largest surge in modern American history. So as the chief prosecutor, I'm working on cases at the land office where we will not only finish that wall, but we're going to bring a case against the federal government to make them do their job. But this does tie into human trafficking. It ties into drug trafficking. The cartels are making 3 times more trafficking young women and children than they are trafficking narcotics. And they're using those same trafficking corridors to do this business. And that's why I was proud to receive this endorsement from the National Border Patrol Council last week, because they know that I'm serious about our national security.
So, wow, I think what you're saying is that building the wall is important and valuable and helpful and safe for our country.
Walls work. Walls work.
Yeah.
Every trip that I go, I've been to Del Rio, I've been to Laredo, El Paso, McAllen, Roma, you name it. And I will find Trump wall on the ground, unfinished, because of the Biden administration's inability to do their job. So my case that I'll be bringing in a few weeks will hold deadbeat bureaucrats and DC politicians accountable, because these were duly appropriated dollars that Congress sent for the Trump wall. Time for you to do your job.
And you talked about DC politicians. There's some good ones that are in your family. You are 4th generation politics. Is it inherited? Is it in your blood? Is it just that you're a brilliant guy? I know the answer to that last one, and it's yes. What made you want to be involved in politics?
Well, as a military veteran, when I came back from my service in 2011, it changed me. I looked at my fellow military veterans here in Texas. I saw a high rate of suicide. I saw a high rate of unemployment, and I felt like I needed to be a part of the solution for our veterans community. And knowing that the land office deals with veterans issues and serves our fellow vets, I knew that I needed to enter that challenge. I've obviously been raised in a family that's taught me, more importantly than anything else, it's not about running for a job. And my message to you is very simple, is to serve causes greater than self. Get in the fight. Be involved in your community. Be strong. Stand in there and be firm. You don't necessarily have to run for office, though. We need future leaders. And in fact, I think the first female president is going to be from this organization.
Oh, yes.
It's not going to be Kamala Harris.
I hope not.
It's not going to be Kamala Harris.
She hasn't been to Europe.
Or the border.
It's only
Yeah,
been
neither
8 or
have I.
9 days since she's been placed as border czar, but we're waiting for her in Texas.
Yeah. She's very busy, cackling. So we have people that aren't cackling or going to Europe because they're here. What message do you have for these young women about their future, whether it's in politics or not?
Well, this is a great platform, and y'all are meeting some of the country's finest leaders and patriots. Hand out your card, get involved in a campaign. I know that there's going to be a lot of them here in Texas, but throughout the nation. I'd love to help you out. You know, it's never too early to get started. The stakes could not be larger. You know, when I first got started in politics, it was hard to believe that socialism would confront us. And polling data shows that 2 of 3 young Americans are open to the idea of socialism, and 1 in 5 are open to communism.
Wow.
And That's just unacceptable. And as a father of an 8 and a 6-year-old, I think about the future of this great country. I think about your future children and your future grandchildren and what kind of country we're going to leave. And I see people from all over the world trying to come to this country, illegally and legally, but for one reason, because we are the greatest country. But it's under assault. It's under assault. It's under assault from a socialist Marxist ideology that's not just part of just a few Democrats in Washington, D.C. or in a few state capitals. It's actually the mainstream part of their party. And Joe Biden campaigned, well, actually he was in the closet, I think, the
basement.
The basement, I'm sorry, yeah.
Eating ice cream.
Yeah.
It's chocolate chip.
But he has led completely contrary to that. And he has allowed AOC and the progressives to run the agenda. And so that's why you all need to get involved, because in short order, we've seen it in Texas with the defund the police movement in Austin, where they've defunded in a liberal progressive city council overnight over $100 million, the honorable men and women that wear the blue uniform every single day, separating us from the chaos and the anarchy in our streets. So whether you're in Texas, California, Florida, any state of this great country, you got to get involved.
So true. And when you talk about getting involved, what young people need to realize, and please piggyback on this, is that city council and school board run. If you don't, you can say, oh, I don't have kids yet. It doesn't matter. That doesn't mean you have to have kids to have a seat at the table, because we need conservatives out like you out there advocating for our future families and our children and our neighborhood. So run for office. What you say? What would you guys say is the best advice for that?
Absolutely. You know, 2020 was the year of the Republican women. We have more female Republicans in the Congress than ever before, and Mandy was a part of that effort. We're doing a good job here in Texas, but we need you to run for office. Don't be afraid. Put your name on that ballot. Get out there and work hard. You'll do it. You'll do it. And I'll be there with you.
Well, I'm going to give it up for the Bushes and for the Republican women and to our 2022 Texas AG. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Thank you all for having us. Thank you.
Thank you guys. That was amazing. Thank you. That was so fun. Oh my gosh. I live in Florida. Maybe.
It is fantastic to be back here with Turning Point USA and the Young Women's Summit. I want to start out with an important fact about our country. According to the World Giving Index, the United States of America is the world's most generous country. We are #1. But you know what else we're #1 in? We're also ranked #1 for individualism. Now, why does that matter? Because individualism strongly correlates with generosity, with charity, and with concern for others, and with gratitude. Other countries that rank in the top 10 for generosity, like Ireland and Australia, England, they also rank in the top 10 for individualism. Those that rank at the very bottom for generosity, like China and Russia, rank at the very bottom for individualism. The very act of valuing the individual and her God-given rights makes people more generous, more empathetic, and more willing to reach out to others outside of their individual group. Democrats falsely conflate individualism with selfishness, ignoring the fact that it is really tribalism and identity politics and socialism and obedience to a central authority that makes people less likely to want to reach out to others outside of their group. This is the ultimate paradox of what socialism sells you versus what it actually gives you. Big government seeks to centralize control by dividing people against each other. There's a rapper and a podcaster named Zuby. He's a libertarian on Twitter. I love him. He's fantastic. So you may have seen this tweet from him, but I thought it was very powerful. He wrote, "Do you know the darkest realization that I've had in the past year? It's not the government overreach. It's not the bastardization of science. It's the realization that a significant number of my fellow citizens would turn on me if instructed to do so by an authority." COVID revealed the strong authoritarian streak in the petty tyrants across our country, many of them governors like my governor, Andy Beshear of Kentucky. I'll give you a little example. So in early January, I was desperately trying to seek the vaccine for my elderly parents. My dad will be 90 years old next week. I'm having a huge party for him. Yes, Hilton Ashby. My mom's 85, so I'd been on the phone with their doctor. He didn't have the vaccine yet, so I thought I'm going to do my due diligence. I'm going to call the local health department and see what I can find out. Do you know what the recorded line said when I called the health department? Nothing about the vaccine. It said, "If you know of any person or business that is violating the governor's COVID-19 mandates and rules, please hang up and call this number to report them." I got a snitch line at the public health department. Nothing about the vaccine, but hey, if I want to turn in one of my neighbors or fellow citizens or businesses to the authorities for non-compliance, they're all in with that. Government has always used the worst impulses in human nature, such as envy and jealousy, to divide people and get them to turn on one another. Your government tells you that the pandemic destroyed the economy, millions of small businesses and livelihoods. This is false. It is the government's unconstitutional overreach and the lockdowns and the mandates that destroyed businesses and livelihoods. Yes. Increased suicides, increased drug addiction and alcoholism, and left kids out of school for over a year, and wrecked the economy that was at its highest point in history, with more jobs, more opportunities, and higher incomes for people of all walks of life. Government overreach destroyed all of that, and now they like to act like heroes while they throw you crumbs in the form of $400 checks, $600 checks, $1,400 checks, while they laugh into their Cabernet and dine at French Laundry like Governor Newsom. But anyone who questioned the lockdowns for over a year was censored or deplatformed by social media or called a COVID denier or conspiracy theorist. This is why the future of our republic depends on people with the courage to think for themselves. People who will push back against groupthink, people like you. And people like my husband, Senator Rand Paul, who has questioned Dr. Fauci for well over a year now, right, and for daring to question a government authority or expert, Rand has faced nothing but condemnation and ridicule from our media. Instead of having any intellectual curiosity about Fauci's answers to Rand questions or any journalistic integrity whatsoever, CNN's Breonna Keeler called Rand an ass on air for daring to question Fauci. NBC's Gayle King giggled at Fauci and said, "Does your body tense up every time you have to talk to Rand Paul?" How idiotic. The American people deserved answers to Rand's questions, not blind devotion to the Democrats in power. But here we are, we're still forcing masks on 2-year-old babies on planes and throwing their families off. We're forcing them on kids running around outside or doing sports or running in track meets, gotta wear the mask. Even though in his own emails, Fauci wrote, and I quote, "The typical mask that you buy at the drugstore does not work because the virus particles are too small and they go right through." This is exactly what Rand has been saying for the last year and a half, and Fauci has been publicly denying. And yet there's no word from Fauci as to why his private health advice and his public health advice are completely contradictory with each other. But Rand never backed down. Not on immunity, not on masks, not on questioning the origins of this virus. And now it is revealed that a leak from the Wuhan lab is indeed likely, despite the fact that a year ago, Fauci and the NIH and the World Health Organization would condemn anyone who dared to even make that question. You were condemned as a conspiracy theorist or a QAnon or some kind of wacko. If you posted anything on social media or questioned the source of the virus, big tech censored you or deplatformed you. We now know that Fauci's NIH has been funding dangerous gain-of-function research through middlemen at EcoHealth using your tax dollars, U.S. tax dollars. Never forget that Fauci deceptively parsed words when he was questioned on this very issue by Rand in front of a full Senate committee hearing. Rand is now calling for a full GAO investigation of Fauci's NIH. We must have transparency, and we must have people other than Fauci and his cohorts who were involved in this dangerous research with the Wuhan lab. We must have people other than them involved in the investigation. We cannot have Fauci investigating himself. You know, perhaps we would have had more transparency if the media would have done its job and acknowledged that Americans had the right to know some of the answers to these questions. But you know, all they ever want to do, anytime Rand would question Fauci, the headlines would scream, "Rand Paul attacks Fauci." Attacks. You know, it's really interesting that when Rand was literally attacked by a Trump-hating lunatic who ran down a hill and slammed into him from behind when he was wearing noise-canceling headphones and had his back turned in our yard, nearly killing him, breaking 6 of his ribs, severely damaging his lung to where he had to have part of it removed. Guess what the media calls that? A dispute. They never use the word attack. They also never mention the violent Facebook posts of this man and all of the things that he said he wanted to do to Donald Trump. No, they don't mention that. They also never mention the fact that this attacker admitted to the police and in court that he had not even spoken to Rand in more than 10 years about anything whatsoever. You never hear that. I wonder why. It did not fit their narrative, the media's desire to downplay or even justify violence against a public official whose political opinions and ideas they didn't agree with. It's worse than just downplaying it. Casey Hunt of MSNBC actually laughed on air and said that my husband's assault was her favorite story. Casey Hunt still has a show on MSNBC. She's never been condemned or criticized by the Democrats or others in the media. Nope. She and her friends at CNN, who lecture us nonstop about dangerous rhetoric, while joking about my husband's pain and suffering and injuries, they're a bunch of hypocrites and liars. What about when Rand and I were surrounded by a Trump-hating mob in Washington, D.C. for nearly 10 minutes? A mob who spit on us, threw liquids on us, screamed in our faces, telling us they were going to F us up, threatening to kill us. Nearly 10 minutes, we are surrounded like this. These people were screaming at me, no masks, by the way, calling me a Trump C word or Trump W word. We're going to F you up. Nearly 10 minutes. You know what the Associated Press said about our attack? The headline was, Rand Paul claims without evidence that he was mobbed in D.C. This is your Associated Press. There's nearly 10 minutes of live-streamed video of that moment. And you know, when you see the part on TV where the police with the bikes are pushing the crowd back, that's the clip they show over and over again. That was actually the least terrifying part, because before those reinforcements with the bikes showed up, we were like this and could not move for almost 10 minutes while these maniacs screamed at us and threatened us. I remember at one point trying to meet the eyes of this man screaming at me, say her name, Breonna Taylor. And I tried to explain. My husband, Rand Paul, actually sponsored a no-knock raid bill calling it the Breonna Taylor law. But these ignorant mobs, they don't know anything. They just feel hatred if you support Trump or if you're a conservative. So after that, all I could do was look down, and I prayed the entire time. And when the reinforcements came with the bikes, and you've seen the video where the mob is pushing so hard they nearly knocked down this big police officer with the bike, nearly knocked him to his feet. You know what the Associated Press said? We were yelled at, and a police officer was jostled by the crowd. Jostled, you know, like if you're at a concert or on the metro, just jostled. Your media lies. There's a Democrat super PAC that actually pays people to foment hatred and violence against Rand and our family. They repeatedly tweet things like, I hope that guy crushes your ribs again. If I ever meet the guy who did that to you, I want to hug him and buy him a beer. These people are never banned or taken off of Twitter for fomenting violence against us. Yet when Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis posts a graph showing statistics that lockdowns don't work, Facebook takes him off. They remove the graph because that's somehow too dangerous for you to see or read. Our free states like Texas and Florida had drastically lower COVID rates than lockdown states like California and Michigan. You know, but when he was asked about this by the media, when Fauci was asked, why didn't we see this predicted impending doom in Florida and Texas, Dr. Fauci said, it's confusing. Well, there are a lot of things that are confusing, Dr. Fauci, and how you are still the head of the NIH is one of them. You know, the media, they covered Rand's interview of Dr. Rachel Levine exactly the same way. He was questioning her in her Senate committee hearings for Deputy of Health and Human Services, and Rand asked a very basic question. If a parent does not want their minor child injected with puberty blockers or sex change drugs or surgery, Does the government have the right to override the parents' wishes and make permanent medical changes to a child's healthy body? Dr. Levine refused to answer. So Rand asked her the exact same question again. Second time, she refused to answer. But the media didn't care about her refusal to answer. Instead, once again, the headline screamed, "Rand Paul attacks Dr. Levine," in a transphobic rant. Rand was polite. He never misgendered Dr. Levine. But the media story was completely fixated on calling Rand names like transphobic. Interestingly, the Democrats and the media did not care to answer to the American people. They don't think that you have the right to know what was really at the heart of Rand Paul's question to Dr. Levine. And that is, what are the limits of government power? Because remember, this is the same government that will arrest you if you drink a beer at age 20 years and 11 months of age because you're not mature enough to make that kind of life-changing decision for yourself. Your brain is not fully formed enough to make that kind of decision. But you could be rendered infertile or castrated with the government's help, and your parents would be powerless to protect you. What are the limits of government power? In the last year, I've actually been very disturbed by the lack of resistance and the desire to question among our young people. And you young women here, you are the exception. And I applaud you for being part. Thank you for being part of Turning Point USA. Thank you for your bravery. I encourage you to follow other like-minded young people on social media. There are some great groups out there like humanprogress.org, FreedomWorks, the Foundation for Economic Education, or FEE. And the folks at FEE tweeted this recently, and I love it. Don't fear cancel culture. Fear becoming a boring and useless version of yourself. A useless version of yourself who never says what you really think or you really believe because of a fear of cancel culture. Don't cancel yourself out of fear that someone else is going to do it for you. The left really just seeks to divide us into these little boxes and categories, and if you don't agree 100% with their position, if you see gray areas, if you want to challenge something, you're canceled. Instead of uniting us as Americans with our shared country and love of our country, they trash our country and say anyone who feels otherwise is a bigot or a racist. Speaking of racists, did you hear that the founder of Black Lives Matter recently bought her 4th luxury home? And she also just left Black Lives Matter after she grifted enough millions to do that, I guess. Another interesting thing is I saw today that she's actually building a wall around her latest 1.4 million, with a gate. I guess after we defund all the police, she wants a little bit of protection. Remember when we were all being pressured into posting the black square on our Instagram in solidarity with Patrice and Black Lives Matter? Silence is violence, we were lectured. Anybody who doesn't conform is probably a racist and needs to be investigated by the FBI. The same FBI, interestingly, that never charged or arrested a single person in the mob that attacked us in D.C. Yeah. I guess real violence isn't violence to them. I thought nothing could shock me more about the Black Lives Matter founder until I saw the video of her giggling in pride that someone had compared her book to Mao's Little Red Book. Chairman Mao, who murdered millions and millions of people in his Cultural Revolution. Chairman Mao, who demanded that all citizens carry a copy of his Little Red Book on their person at all times or risk being beaten by roving bands of government thugs called the Red Guard. Chairman Mao, who seized the farms and homes of citizens, who forced them to burn their books, destroy their religious icons, and abandon their traditions and beliefs. BLM founder Patrice Cullers is proud of the comparison. Let that sink in for a moment. In being proud of the comparison to one of the worst mass murderers in history, the founder of Black Lives Matter is either staggeringly ignorant of history or she is evil. It's one or the other. Like all tyrants, Mao came to power promising perfect equality, or equity in today's language of the socialists of today. To achieve his socialist nirvana, Mao used the age-old tactics of tyrants everywhere: jealousy, envy, class warfare, and hatred. He terrorized and completely destroyed the bourgeois class, the merchant owners and property owners. His first tactic was to kill every landowner in every village by public execution. After all, you can't have perfect equity if property is owned by some and not others, right, Patrice? Rand and I have a very close friend. His name is Ming Wang, and he is an eye surgeon in Nashville. He has an amazing story and a miraculous journey to the United States. It's a truly awe-inspiring story. He wrote it in his book called From Darkness to Sight. It's a first-hand account of Mao's Cultural Revolution, and I really encourage anybody who wants to know a first-hand account to read that book. Rand and I also wrote about Mao in our book, The Case Against Socialism. Thank you. But Ming Wang's parents were doctors, and his mother bravely tried to protect her clinic and her lab when the Red Guard came through. She was beaten so badly that she could not walk for a year, and when she was able to walk, she was sent to a forced labor camp for 2 years. Ming Wang was only 11 years old at the time. Most of the Red Guard were young men and boys who were beating their parents and grandparents for holding on to their property or their traditions. Mao encouraged the youth of China to purge the country of what he called the four olds: old customs, old culture. Anyone who was sympathetic to capitalism, all were purged. He forced men and women alike to wear the same gray, unisex, pajama-like clothing, which symbolized pure equality for all. Anyone who dared to wear traditional clothing or Western clothing was beaten by the Red Guard. You know, this is where complete equity achieved through government control always leads: the ultimate destruction of the individual. The ultimate destruction of the individual, our God-given rights, our God-given uniqueness, the beautiful mystery and humanity of all people somehow must be homogenized and erased in order to create this purely equitable and fair ideal. By the way, when the Democrats tell you that we don't have equity in the USA, tell them this: the poorest 20% of Americans consume more goods and services than the median income earners in wealthy European countries like Germany. We are the richest, the freest, and the most generous country in the history of the world. Capitalism, which is basically nothing more than the freedom of voluntary exchange, is what made us this way. So thank you for daring to stand up for capitalism, individualism, free markets, free people, and the right to question government authority. Because today's left is truly hostile to the idea that Americans can think for themselves and can make up their own minds. They believe it's too dangerous for your weak mind. You'll be fooled by disinformation. So better let the government or Mark Zuckerberg regulate what you can see and hear and read. The ministry of truth is here, and we must do everything we can to protect our rights, to question government authority, to be skeptical, to challenge, to debate, to seek the truth, and not to yield. Never apologize for your beliefs and never back down, because you, the women in this room, you are the resistance now. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your bravery.
There are times when you do need abortion.
It's our body, it's our decision.
Pro-choice, for sure.
I had no idea this is how abortion takes place.
The videos that you guys show me has changed my mind. You just gotta suck it up because it's a life.
In the early part of my career as an OBGYN, I performed over 1,200 abortions.
14 and under? You never got this from me. Just send them right there if they need an abortion. Okay. I didn't hear the age. I don't want to know the age. It could be reported as rape.
The whole sexual revolution and the women's movement were two radically separate movements.
True feminism seeks to promote all aspects of who a woman is. When someone says that children conceived in rape should be aborted, they're talking about me.
Do we really know when life begins?
So when people try to say my body, my choice, it doesn't make sense. This is not just my body here. There are 3 bodies.
Our lives are worth living.
The day that I found out that 3 doctors wanted me dead was heart-wrenching.
Instead of going to an abortion appointment that day, I told the gynecologist we're having a baby.
She got the abortion at Kalamazoo Planned Parenthood.
My daughter! I think she's dead!
They killed my sister. I'm all in it now.
A Barbie girl growing up. I was an American Girl. So I'm a little awkward about the box over there. It's more like the Samantha. That was my girl, Samantha. She was more like the colonial ruffle types, but it's cool. We like Barbies. We can accept Barbies. I flew in last night. So my name is Lila Rose. I am the president and founder of Live Action, and woo! Any live action ambassadors in the room? Woo! And I'm also a California girl. Any California girls? I love it. I feel like Texas and Florida get a lot of shout outs here, but California, we're gonna take California back, right? So I flew in from Oakland, and we're gonna take San Francisco back, we're gonna take Los Angeles back. I'm from San Jose. I flew in from Oakland. I left my toddler son sleeping at home, came here, and I had a lot in my heart. I was like, this is such an important conference. This is such an important event, because the women in this room, we are not just women of passion. We're not just women of conservative values. We are women of solutions. And I think the solutions that we can bring to bear in this room over the next couple days can change this country and change the world. And that's what I'm excited to talk about today, the solutions for the future of this country. I'm also not alone on this stage. I've got somebody with me on the stage. I'm actually expecting number 2. So it's awesome. Let me tell you, being a mom, there is no greater joy and job in the world than being a mom. It is amazing. I can't even tell you how amazing it is, and it's made that much more amazing because I'm so grateful to have married an amazing man. That definitely helps a ton. I have such much more respect and reverence for single moms and how they handle it because it's not easy, but it's amazing. It is amazing. So can't wait for this one. Can't wait to see Peter, my 18-month-old, be a big brother. And it's with all the work in the last 15 years that I've been involved in, starting live action in high school, building it in college in my 20s, I will tell you that there's nothing more rewarding than having that family that you come home to. And it is such a huge blessing. So I talked about solutions. I want to first begin with 2 problems that I think are really the foundational problems that we face. I think a lot of us have been talking this morning and last night, and we'll be talking the next few days about what does the conservative movement face and the politics. And all of that is really important. So I don't want to underplay any of the topics or issues that are being discussed at this event because they're all really important. And I know the women that come here, you all come here with different things that you're passionate about. And I think that's really important too. But what I want to talk about are 2 key problems and then 3 solutions that I think underpin really all of our, not just our political system, but our society. And unless we solve these problems, all of the things we talk about, freedom, the economy, thriving, justice, the future, we can't secure. We can't secure unless we address these 2 things. So the first thing I want to talk about is something that I became aware of as a young girl. It completely broke my heart. It changed my life forever. And it was really my heartbreak over this issue that would inspire me to start my organization. And we are now a global education and media organization, so we're educating tens of millions of people every week with the truth about human life and dignity, motherhood and fatherhood. But it all started in San Jose, California, one afternoon when I had my first experience of heartbreak over an issue that at first I felt helpless to solve. And it was when I first found out about and really encountered for the first time what abortion was. And I think heartbreak's really powerful. Heartbreak can change our lives for the better. It teaches us compassion. It teaches us to care. Sometimes it breaks us internally so that we can be remade in a stronger way. But for me, finding out about abortion, actually seeing for the first time what happens to that baby in the first trimester during the most prevalent abortion procedures, and this is just such heavy stuff, but finding out what happens to that baby in the first trimester, that child with a beating heart, you can see by 10 weeks old in utero, face, arms, legs, and seeing a child that had become the victims, and this was in a history book I was reading, there was photography in it, but seeing that child who had become a victim of a first trimester suction abortion, and just being devastated over that. And beginning to learn more, I was really passionate, I wanted to discover more, and I found out that abortion is presented today as women's empowerment, right? It's being presented today as a pathway to us getting ahead, as something key that we need in order to thrive as women. And since then, since that became the rule of our country in 1973, and by the way, guess who decided that for the country? Men. It wasn't a vote that we took. It wasn't some decision that we got together and made. 7 men on the Supreme Court of the United States made the decision for the entire country that abortion was somehow going to be a woman's right and empowerment for us. And since then, over 60 million lives have been taken by abortion. 60 million boys and girls have been killed by abortion. The daily death toll is the highest cause of death, the leading cause of death in America. Nothing else even comes close. Deaths to cancer, deaths to heart attacks, deaths to car accidents, deaths to COVID, whatever you name it, the leading cause of death is 2,362 abortions every single day in America. And so when I was learning about this, it inspired me to want to do something about it because I knew it was a lie. And that's the thing, these two problems I'm talking about, it is lies that underpin them. As long as the lies are allowed to live, as long as the lies are being told in society that it's not a baby, right? It's not a baby, it's not a life yet, it's just a clump of cells. Or they say, oh, if you're pregnant and you're a student, or if you're pregnant and you're working, you can't do it. You have to have an abortion. You can't hack your education. What kind of message of empowerment is that to us? That we don't have what it takes. That we have to take the life of the child within us in order to move on and get ahead and compete with men and get out there and be successful. That is the anti-empowerment message. But that's the message that we are being sold. So just to illustrate this problem, because I know there's probably a lot of different experiences in the room today, and I want to say for any of us, there are many of us, whether we're in church or we're in school or wherever we are, there are going to be people wherever we go, friends we may have, maybe ourselves, who've had an experience with abortion. So I want to share this because I think it's key that we reckon with it and then we get the healing that we need, because the end game here is healing and freedom. And the video I want to share right now, we can clap for healing and freedom. We need that. Our country needs that. We don't want to be the walking wounded. And women after abortion become the walking wounded. If we live in the denial and say it wasn't a life, it wasn't our child, we are still living in the walking wounded. The Journal of British Psychiatry has a study, a comprehensive study that they did. In the year after an abortion, a woman is 155 times more likely to commit suicide. She is 37% more likely to be depressed. She's 110% times more likely to become addicted to alcohol. This is devastating not just our children, but our sisters. It's devastating us. So I want to show a brief video just to illustrate this. A lot of the work Live Action does is expose the evil that's happening so we can present the truth and ultimately the good, that is humanity of the child. And this video is a sample of some of our work, and it shows young, brave women going undercover into abortion clinics, talking to abortionists about what really happens during these procedures. You're not going to see this on CNN. You're not going to see this on most of your social media feeds or your Instagram channels. You're not going to hear this from leading celebrities or politicians, because what they want to say is that abortion is a no-brainer, it's great, we all need it, and this is actually the truth of what abortion is. So we're going to show this. The ladies in this video who are undercover are actually pregnant, really brave women. We work with an amazing team of women, and they're going to talk to some of our country's most notorious late-term abortionists. So we can play the video now.
At this point, does it have like all of its organs and all of that stuff? Like, is it already fully
It's not
developed?
fully developed. It doesn't even look like, it doesn't even look like a baby yet.
It doesn't?
It has parts, like we all have parts, but it's not done.
So, like, does it have a face or like all of that stuff? Or?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay.
So it's almost like we're guaranteed it's like we're okay.
It's we induce a demise, an injury or a demise.
What does demise mean?
Death. Okay. We use a combination of suction and then real instruments to literally go in and grab and pull pieces out.
Okay.
Okay. Maybe that's a little more graphic than I usually describe it.
For some reason, I'm not able to deliver. You'll be able to get it out.
Take it out
in pieces.
But that at 26 weeks is very, very good.
And what do you use to break it up? Just
A whole bunch of it.
got a toolkit.
Yeah, axe and drill, but yeah.
I see. Okay.
Does it ever like move or anything when it comes out? Or?
That's why I try and sever the umbilical cord first, and we wait for that to stop pulsing, and that's why the fetus is expired first, so it doesn't.
Has it ever survived?
After when it comes out? Not here, no. Usually at this point in the pregnancy is too early to survive usually.
Okay.
It will expire shortly after birth.
But if it did, like what would happen?
You know, technically, you know, legally we would be obligated to help it, you know, to survive. But, you know, it probably wouldn't.
But would you make sure that it doesn't
you know, there's things you do. Obviously, you're here for a certain procedure, and if your pregnancy were, let's say you went into labor, the membrane's ruptured, and you delivered before we got to the termination part of the procedure here, you know, then we would do things, we would not help it. Okay. Let's say.
It's so hard. It's hard to even, I mean, I've seen this video probably several times now, and it's so hard to watch, but it makes me so fired up because not only do our children deserve better than how we treat children in this country, but women deserve better than this garbage that's being presented as medical care. I mentioned there were two problems. I want to run through the second one, because how did we get here? How did we get to the point? 100 years ago, this would have been unthinkable. 100 years ago in our society, we had other problems we were struggling with, but we weren't struggling with seeing children as cheap that we could be thrown away in a trash can if they're preborn. And so how did we get here? And we got here because something earth-shattering happened about 50 to 80 years ago, early 20th century. Something earth-shattering happened in our society, and it was called the sexual revolution. And I don't think this is talked about enough in conservative circles, but it's so important to understand what's happened in our society today and what's happening, even with the transgender issue, with feminism, with men versus women, with abortion. What happened in the mid-20th century? What happened was sex suddenly became, there was a whole new narrative around sex, a lie about sex, that sex was no longer about lifelong love and commitment, a marriage, someone you can rely on who's pledged themselves to you for the rest of their lives, that sex wasn't about the beautiful possibility of bringing life into the world, children, but that sex was actually just about whatever two consenting adults wanted it to be. That sex was basically cheapened, it was no longer sacred. And so the sexual revolution said, as long as you consent, you can do whatever you want, and you are entitled to sex without getting pregnant. Well, what happens? 51% of the women who have abortions in the month they got pregnant were using contraception. Even with the mantra of safe sex, it's not safe. It's not safe. And so what happens is you create a streamline into the abortion clinic. And that's why our abortion rates are so high, because we get sex wrong, because we've forgotten to see what sex is all about. And we've forgotten to see what love is about. I think every woman in this room, we're here because we believe in our value, we believe in our worth, we believe in the worth and dignity of other people, but how often in our society do we raise the bar for men? How often in our society are we raising the standard? It's like we're constantly lowering the standard. And what does that lead to? It leads to the carnage that you saw on the screen. It ultimately leads to the abortion industry, because we have then people who get pregnant who aren't ready to be parents, who say they're not ready for commitment, they're not ready for marriage, and then instead we have the abortion industry open for business, killing 2,300 babies a day. So I mentioned solutions. What's the solution to the sexual revolution? What's the solution to changing that whole dynamic? And instead of it being something cheap, sex is something beautiful again. And instead of life being seen as something cheap, life is seen as something sacred again. How do we get there? And there's three things I want to propose to you that I think every woman in this room has the solution for if we're willing to live this. And it's not easy to live these three things. I'm going to start by saying that because there are so many forces in our society working against them, telling us that these standards, these principles don't matter, telling us to lower the bar. But if we as women, the worth that we have, we raise the bar and we require everyone around us to raise the bar too, we raise the level of our society. We raise the standards in our society. We can set the tone as women. We can set the tone of the rooms that we enter, on the dates that we go on, in the classrooms that we sit, in the rooms that we occupy. We can set the tone as women. So the first thing is this: know your worth. Know your worth. I don't know about all of you, but I've had a private struggle with my worth in the past, and it still pops up sometimes. When I was a teenager, starting Live Action, and I was this activist on this crusade, but I really struggled with my worth. There was a time when I was struggling with depression, I was struggling with disordered eating, I was even struggling with self-harm. Even though I had these principles or these values, I had trouble seeing the value in myself. And I think sometimes this is the deadly secret enemy of us women. And so I want to encourage you, what helped me and really changed the trajectory of my life as a teenager, and I don't think I'd even be on this stage right now if I hadn't done this, is a friend challenged me to ask for help. I had a friend who said, if you don't tell your parents, I will, about all of the things I was going through. And thankfully I had parents who wanted to help me. And so one afternoon I told my parents what I was going through. I started getting counseling, I started going on this healing journey, getting mentors that could help me. We all need help at some point. Part of knowing our worth as women is asking sometimes for the help we might need. Part of knowing our worth as women is being there for our sister or the friend next to us in her quiet struggle, whatever that struggle might be. And it'll look different for all of us. The second thing is to raise the bar for men. We need to raise the bar for men. Where are the good men? Where are the men? Well, this is a women's conference, but I mean, I have so many girlfriends. They're like, where are the good men? Where are the men? And yes, there are good men out there, but we have to be willing to raise the bar for them. I think sometimes in our loneliness or frustration or just fears of being alone, whatever it might be, we might lower our bar. We might lower our standard. And I'm gonna tell you, your standards are not too high, they are probably too low. We need to raise the bar as women. We can set the tone for men. We can challenge men to be better. Because men shouldn't be about, oh, I'm going to sleep with you before marriage, and if you have a kid, I'm going to abandon you and take you to an abortion clinic. That's not masculinity, right? That's not manhood. A man is somebody who is working in their life to become someone who can be a worthy father and husband one day, right? That's manhood. And we can inspire that in men by ourselves living out a womanhood that's worthy of that wants that standard. Again, our society is telling us constantly to cheapen that, but we can raise the bar. And then the last thing, and it's what Live Action is focused 100% on. It's what I've spent so much of my work doing, and that's fight for children. Fight for children. They need us. Children need us. And part of fighting for children is fighting for their moms. It's fighting for families. It's fighting for those that need our help, who are struggling. That's what part of fighting for children is. Feminism, being pro-women, being for women's rights, we've secured equal dignity under the law to men. We have equal treatment under the law to men, largely speaking, in this country. It's amazing what we've achieved, the feminist movement has achieved in this country, the early feminist movement. Today's feminism has become this toxicity now, where we're pitting women against children. Let's use our rights. Let's use the freedom that we have from knowing our own worth to fight for the rights of children, to secure the right of every child to be born, the right to life for every single child in this country. And we can do that. If our movement takes back the truth about life and lives the truth about sex, relationships, love, marriage, we build strong communities, strong families, we build the next generation of strong children, and we change the world. And that change, that solution, is in this room today. It starts with us. Thank you so much, ladies. God bless you guys. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, my goodness, I love the energy in this room. This is fantastic, and I hope you all are going to help me in 2022, and you're going to keep this energy going. We have got to make certain we send a message to Joe Biden that we hold the Democrats accountable and that we fire Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. I have to tell you, we have gone from America first to America last. And look at what this administration is doing. Gas prices, inflation, trying to make D.C. a state, trying to federalize elections. The list goes on and on and on. I heard somebody boo, and you could boo to every one of those. It makes you miss President Donald Trump. And think about what he did for this country. Supported our military, supported our veterans, supported law enforcement, held China and Iran and the axis of evil accountable, cut taxes, and did a pretty good job saying, "I'm proud to be an American." So I need your help. America needs your help. And let's talk a little bit about how important it is for you to build out your network. Let me ask you a question. How many of you like being the go-to gal when people have questions about current events? Raise your hands. Yeah, see, you like that. So what we have to do in order to keep you in that spot of being the go-to gal is make sure you have your network. And by the way, that means we're going to have to elect more Republican women we need to elect them at the local, state, and federal level. And we've got an election coming up where there is a Republican woman running right here in Texas in the 6th Congressional District. And it's July 27th, and Susan Wright is running to fill the seat of her late husband. She's been endorsed by President Trump, and she is one of those happy warrior freedom fighters, as I like to say, who gets up every day and says, let's go defend faith, family, freedom, hope, and opportunity. I've endorsed Susan, and we need each of you to get your networks going and be on social media supporting her. This is a seat that we can win and send one more conservative woman to the U.S. House of Representatives. I think what you're doing here today is so vitally important. Turning Point USA does a great job of training and educating young women and helping you to get prepared to run for office and helping you get prepared to influence the opinion of your friends and those that are around you. Didn't you love listening to Lila Rose talk about life? And see, she is making a difference because she has gotten to work making certain that people understand that being pro-life is being pro-woman and it's being pro-child. And what a great thing to do. What we have to do is realize your voices matter. And on college campuses and in schools, the cancel culture is alive and well. And many times they are going to try to shut your voice down. But what you have to do is move to a point where you can fight back. And learning how to push back so that you're heard. Sometimes the left pushes back in a way they're shouting so loudly, nobody ever hears what they say. So let's win these debates. I want to give you an example of a young woman who is winning the debate. Have you all heard about Kelley McLaughlin at University of Oklahoma? She was kicked off of the volleyball team there because of her conservative beliefs. But she is fighting back, and that is the thing to do, to push back, to make these arguments, to say, look, our nation has been well served by robust, respectful political debate. We've been well served by that. It's been good for our country. It's been good for freedom and freedom's cause. And then if somebody's in an argument with you, say, let me ask you a question. What do you think about this? And see, our nation needs you to be doing this, to be pulling young voters with you to the conservative side, because Ronald Reagan told us, freedom is always what? One generation away from extinction. And right now in the White House, the House, and the Senate, we have leftists that are trying to shut the door on freedom and freedom's cause. They're trying to restrict your freedoms. They're trying to restrict your free speech. And once they restrict your free speech, they'll take away your guns. We know what they will do. We know what they will do. So we have to make certain that we're going to win this argument and that we're going to be pushing back on the left and holding them to account for what they are doing. There are a couple of bills and a couple of issues right now that are really taking Washington, D.C.'s time. How many of you have heard about H.R. 1? It is a big topic of conversation, isn't it? This is the bill. It's Nancy Pelosi's favorite bill. We don't want that to win, do we? No, of course not. This would federalize elections. What it would do would be to take away the power of your local election commission to run elections. It would take all these databases from a state and it would dump all of those into the voter rolls, whether it is driver's license. This is how they want to have illegal aliens who are into our country to vote. It would take some of these bases, students, it would put all of them into the same database so everybody could vote. It would institutionalize mail-out balloting so everybody on the list gets a ballot. It would remove your county elections commission's ability to clean up those rolls and make certain it's people that are there that are voting. And we are pushing back on this. And here's the way you do it. When somebody at your college or your school is saying, well, we want H.R. 1, we want the federal government in charge of this, ask them, how do you like the IRS? How do you like the motor vehicle office? Do you believe, and here is the crux of the matter, do you believe that each person should have only one vote? Yes. That is an underlying premise. It is an underlying premise of our democratic republic. Everybody gets one vote. Everybody. So push back on that. Of course, we want everybody to vote. My pickup truck in Tennessee had a license plate on it for years that said simply vote, exercise your right. Here's another issue, border security. And this is, when you talk about provisions that are for women and for children, securing that southern border is a very pro-woman and pro-child policy. Here's the reason why. The southern border on the Mexico side is being run by cartels. You do not cross the border unless you've paid the cartel. Women and children are being physically and sexually abused to the point that every child that comes across, every young girl has to have a pregnancy test. This is what is transpiring. Many of these individuals, and there have been 500,000 plus apprehended so far this year, they come with a wristband. It's one color if you've paid the cartel, it's another color if you have to work out your fee. This means you're going into a sex trafficking ring, a labor ring, a MS-13 gang. This is not a pro-woman, pro-child policy. We don't want anybody to spend their life in slavery and servitude. We want people to come to this country legally so that they can experience the bounty and the wonder of this great country. And there's another issue that is in the news quite a bit right now, and it is the COVID cover-up. And what is going on with Dr. Fauci and his emails with Mark Zuckerberg. He was not giving information to the American people. He was hiding that information, and he was running a PR campaign. There are 3 questions that every American should want to be asked and answered by Dr. Fauci. Why was the Wuhan lab leak theory never investigated? And why did Dr. Fauci have the same line of justification that the Chinese Communist Party had about Wuhan and the Wuhan lab? And the third thing, for those of us like me and Senator Rubio and Senator Cotton that said, let's investigate this lab, why did they allow and continue to call us anti-Asian and racist? Because we were trying to get answers for the American people. You all lost a year of your life. You lost a year of education, of socialization, and the American people have paid a heavy price. Hundreds of thousands of families have lost loved ones, or they've been ill, they've been impacted, livelihoods have been lost, and the American taxpayer deserves answers to these questions. And that is how you fight back. There is tremendous value in the people. And in the Constitution, people is in caps. So let me tell you a quick little story about when the people showed up to be the people. When I was in the state Senate in Tennessee, I led a battle against imposition of a state income tax, which we don't have in Tennessee. And we are a tax-free state. But during this battle, which was not 4 days or 4 months or 4 weeks, it was 4 full years, I had a colleague in the state Senate who gave an interview and said, oh, Marcia's a caucus of 1. Nobody wants to work with her on this issue. We'll find a way to work this out. And you know what? It hurt my feelings for about 5 minutes. And then I realized I was a caucus of 1 with tens of thousands of Tennesseans standing with me saying, we don't want a state income tax. But you know what, ladies? It takes somebody to stand up and say, I will fight on this issue, which is what I did. So, after 4 years, we defeated that state income tax. I left to go to the U.S. House of Representatives, and my colleagues in the state Senate, my former colleagues, drafted a resolution, passed it, and in 2014, our state ratified an amendment to our state constitution. We will never have a state income tax. The people of Tennessee, we were the people. It was a worthy fight. Your freedom, your liberty, that is a worthy fight, and that fight needs you. Now, one more story. I, many years ago, hosted a new group of legislators from Estonia, the old Southern Soviet bloc. And they came into Nashville to watch some good elections take place. We know how to count ballots in Nashville, and we make certain everybody has one vote. And so I brought them in. I thought, well, I'll take them out to the Grand Ole Opry. So I did. They loved every minute of it. But as they were sitting on the stage watching these Opry entertainers, I saw one guy over on the side. I noticed he was on his knees. Hands were on the floor. I thought, oh my goodness. I walked over. I put my hand on his back and I said, are you okay? He said, I'm wonderful. And I thought, well, okay. But he had for many years listened to the Opry over the radio. They had a radio, one of their few possessions. And he would hear the sounds of music. And he said, you know, I always said, if I could escape communism, if I could get out of here, if I could get to America, I would kiss the ground these entertainers walk on. Think about that. You don't know what you've got till it's gone. You don't know what you've got till it's gone. And right now, each of you live in a land of plenty. You live in the freest country on the face of the earth. And if we are going to maintain this, if we're going to keep it, if your generation, my children's generation, is going to be able to live in freedom, if my grandsons and granddaughter are going to live their lives in freedom, it is up to you, to me, to all of us, to every day say, this is worth my time. This is a worthy fight. And today, I will do something to make certain I preserve faith, family, freedom, hope, and opportunity. So, are you with me? Are you ready for the fight? Okay. Let's be certain that we start sending the Democrats a big message, because we never want you, a powerhouse, to be silenced. Thank you all so much.